Hearing no corrections.
I do have one.
We have one.
Okay. Harold Caldwell spoke with me and asked for a change, specifically that she has witnessed court cases where, and then the rest of it should be okay. This is on public comments. She didn't actually witness the events themselves, but witnessed court cases where these things happen, or appear to have happened. Okay?
Thank you. Any other corrections? I'll have a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Moved by Juan Carlos, seconded by James. And all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Minutes are approved. Thank you very much. Moving on to public comment this time. Okay. I'll turn it over to the camera.
Thank you. I currently have 3 people signed up to speak at our public forum. As I call your name, I'd like to invite you up to the table. You can either sit at the end down here or here. First, I have Carol Caldwell.
Carol Caldwell, 2510 Augusta. Well, as you know, is my habit on your meeting days, I come generally with a 3-minute comment about things I may have seen in court, and I certainly went home this afternoon after court and prepared such a presentation, and then I realized it's not what I wanted to do. So I shelved it until another time because I realized I had been thinking so much about Eric Humphreys in the last 9 or 10 days. And I also was thinking, in conjunction with my memories of him, of the phrase in the movie from the 50s, On the Waterfront, I could have been a contender. But I changed it because I thought I could have been more of a community member, outreach person with Eric. And I'm sorry that I did not. I did have a chance to have one meeting with him, with my colleague Majeska C. Screen. And at that meeting, I saw how much this man cared about the well-being and the interests, not simply of his union members, of which he led that agency, not agency, but union, for a long time, and before that as vice president. But I knew he cared about police in general, but I also saw that he cared a great deal about community, issues that people had raised, including some that we raised in that meeting, he was so receptive to. So in thinking about him, I'm going to be more of a contender and not miss these opportunities to follow up and share with people who have key roles in our community. I'm also very grateful for the police family because I have often seen when one of their officers have fallen, how they do circle around and help the family and each other. And it's something that we can all learn by too. So I will always remember Eric.
Thank you. Next, I have Deb Frisch.
On September 22nd, 2013, City Prosecutor Barkovic was arrested for DUI and failure to take a breath test. After he pleaded guilty, Judge Conover fined him $325. However, Oregon Revised Statutes 813.130 mandates a minimum of $500 fine for this infraction. By knowingly violating a statute pertaining to his office, Judge Conover apparently committed official misconduct in the 2nd degree. On October 30th, 2012, federal Judge Michael Hogan sentenced a convicted arsonist to a year in prison. However, in 1996, Congress passed a law mandating a 5-year minimum sentence for this crime. When Judge Hogan failed to impose a statutorily mandated sanction on a convicted criminal, he appears to have committed a crime himself. Then there's official misconduct in the 1st degree. This is when a public servant fails to perform a duty inherent in his or her office in order to obtain a benefit. An example is a law enforcement agent who fails to initiate criminal charges against a fellow government employee even when there's overwhelming evidence of criminal behavior. For example, Marion County Chief Deputy D.A. Clarkson failed to charge former County Administrator Richardson of official misconduct in the 2nd degree, even though it was clear that Ms. Richardson knowingly violated county statutes governing the conversion of sick leave into take-home pay. The reason was that doing so would have criminally implicated other Lane County officials. A public servant who knowingly provides false or misleading information to the public could also be accused of official misconduct in the 1st degree. On March 5th, the district attorney failed to press charges against Ricardo Cheney after Mr. Cheney was arrested by EPD for felony possession of ecstasy and having concealed weapons without a permit. Mr. Cheney had been charged with a half-dozen violent crimes in the last 15 years. The DA said he was forced to use a triage system because he lacked the resources to prosecute 30% of felonies. He said that Mr. Cheney's crime was below the threshold for prosecution. On March 19th, Mr. Cheney killed a retired U of O dean and a Mendocino County deputy. On March 24th, a young woman with no criminal record was charged with possession of less than an ounce of marijuana. Since this crime is probably the lowest in terms of importance, Mr. Gardner's allegation that the decision not to prosecute Mr. Cheney was due to the application of an evidence-based triage system is dubious. It is troubling that the DA is prosecuting pot users. 95% of Eugene residents are in possession of less than an ounce of marijuana. The other 5% have more than an ounce. Fortunately, I'm out of time.
Oh, you still had 30 seconds if you
That's
want.
okay, I tied it to your...
Oh, thank you. Okay. Next I have Melissa Wellington.
Sorry if I talk really loudly, I can't hear today. I'm Melissa Wellington. The first thing I want to say is that it seemed in this policy that racial profiling and bias-based policing were used sort of interchangeably in this policy, and maybe just putting them both under bias-based profiling, as it seems that racial profiling is part of bias profiling. I could be wrong on that point. It's just something to consider. Also, where it says this policy shall apply to all sworn members who have the law enforcement authority to detain, investigate, and arrest persons or provide law enforcement service. Maybe consider changing that to all people employed by the Eugene Police Department, because the profiling doesn't just exist with the police officers, but with every, like the people who take the calls. There's just a myriad of people who that could apply to. And down under 402.2 policy, where it says the Eugene Police Department is equally committed to providing equitable law enforcement services to the community with due regard for the protected class status of those served. I believe that bias-based policing, everybody has a bias, and there's a possible bias against every person served, so maybe could consider everyone in the community. Due regard for everyone, not just those that are protected, because someone might just fall through the cracks, and that would be difficult to prove or not prove. So that's all I have for you today. Thank you.
Thank you. And last, I have Stephen Luke. Did I say that correctly?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for allowing me to take some time here. I don't have any prepared notes, so it's kind of a last-minute decision to come down here. James is a friend of mine from Chamber of Commerce and invited me to come down and state a concern we have for the industrial area of West Eugene with the homeless camping that's happening around our area. I own a business in that area, Contractors Electric, and specifically we're talking about the area bounded by Bertelsen, Beltline, and then Roosevelt to West 11th. We have a lot of businesses in that area. It's predominantly industrial, commercial. In fact, I know of only one residence, which is an above business location. And in the last 4 years that we've been there, we've seen an increase of homeless camping in the area. About 3 months ago, we asked the police to look into it, and they ended up within about a week to 10 days of clearing the area out. At that time, we had about 10 or 12 people camping on the street outside of our businesses. And like they suggested might happen, did. Within about 2 or 3 months, they started coming back. We made some more calls in last week, and this week they're about half of them gone. There's probably 3 or 4 left. The concerns we have is that it continues to happen and will continue to happen until we do some more things. James suggested that this was a start to voice our concerns, but that I might also look into other things such as an area petition to have no camping signs posted so that people know that it's not okay. The concerns we have for the businesses there is that people are coming in and they're pretty much out of sight during the day, but at night they're going from business to business. Last week, several of us came out just after dark and encountered someone had our trash and our recycling strewn all over the parking lot, right in front of our front door, looking for valuables, and we understand their need to provide some income this way, but if it had been one of the females in our group, I know that she would have been very startled by it. Last year we had one who came in through our open shop door, back through the back of our office and into our office area, and that was actually quite startling. And I know it's not normally the case of all homeless campers, but this one was quite inebriated or high on something, and we couldn't even understand him. And then we've had, in just recent weeks, we've had a number of thefts and vandalisms in the area, including over this past weekend, we had the power turned off to our office twice, and we believe that was in an effort to find out what our response was going to be. But fortunately for us, with alarms, we were called immediately. But I'd like to state our position that we're concerned about what's happening over there, and particularly with the other homeless situations that are going in our community. I know it's not the whole issue, but ours is one of concern for our people and others that work in the area. And it's leaving quite a mess. The people that left this week left a disaster behind. So appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. If there are no other public speakers, that concludes our public hearing.
Thank you, Tamara, appreciate that. And one of the things I heard, and have taken some steps to hopefully correct, is that sometimes people come to speak to commission members, and then we go on to the next item agenda, and it doesn't seem like we're addressing anything. So what we've added here is a response time for the commissioners to weigh in and give their comments that they might want to give about what they heard tonight, and also anything else that pertains to maybe the same topic that somebody brought up here, not necessarily to their remarks, but on that topic. So anybody like to start?
Thank you. First off, it's nice to be back with everyone. I missed last month. I was in Washington, D.C. and stuff. I would have much preferred to have been here, but it was exciting anyway. Just kind of to, a couple of things is that the recent passing that we had within the department and stuff, we all feel that, and I'd like to offer my personal condolences and stuff. It's never easy, but we never know when things are going to turn and how they turn as far as, we are affected by certain things. The homeless issue that Steve was brought up about is not exactly a homeless issue, more like a security problem. I did a little observation over in the area, and he has a real concern about that area. I drove around and I looked, and there were some campers on. These are not traditional homeless people. These folks that are parked over there have campers and stuff, and they're pretty nice campers. I was told that at one point where Lieutenant Feldman went over to the area and stuff, and they did a survey, and they found out that there were a couple of people over there that were known felons that are known to be armed. So this is a real concern. I would like to see that we do something to kind of make sure that the folks that work over in that area and stuff do get the kind of security that they have. So it's not the typical homeless people that we would think about, say, for example, Whoville. So that is a concern of mine as well. There was a comment about the policy itself, where it says sworn officers, and probably as it pertains to all EPD employees, that might be a good consideration, because it's a departmental policy, and you don't want to say that one part of the EPD have to act this way and then the other part don't have to act that way. It kind of divides the team. So if everybody's falling up under the same policy and stuff, then I think that would be pretty consistent. There's no ambiguity or anything like that involved with that. And for the other portion about the thing about what I heard about the disparity and treatment and stuff, or how the judges and stuff are responding, probably be a good idea to take that over to the county, Pat Farr, who is now president of the county commission, and then we got an election that's coming up too, so your vote is very important. So those things need to be taken up as well. Thank you.
Thank you. George?
I have no comments.
Mike?
I agree with her suggestion that James mentioned about the policy language. I think that's a good idea based on what I know and read and heard. I think that's a good idea. Also would encourage Steve to come and give that same testimony to council as well, at the public forum. I think the next one will be this Monday at 7:30, so same kind of thing, get there a couple minutes, sign up sort of deal. I'd encourage you to come do that as well. That's it, thanks.
Thank you, Jim.
I support what James and Mike just said about the policy. I know some of the difficulties there are. So in reading the policy, it looks like it's mostly based on visual. I'm not sure there's much as far as the rest of the force. I'm not sure how much visual contact they have with different classes that we're talking about. But maybe that policy, maybe the language could be worded to work out better for all the officers, or even something as far as the whole city goes. And I also would encourage Stephen to talk to the commissioners. I know Mike would definitely like to have somebody come in and speak to those issues, and I agree that would probably be a really good place to bring those issues up. And good to see everybody again. I'm sorry, I think I've got some allergies going that I've never had before, so I'm kind of sniffing a lot these days. This is the first year I've had them, so I apologize if I'm not sick, it's just allergies, so. Thanks.
Sniffing is duly noted, thank you. Jesse?
Out in the Train Song neighborhood, we've got 3 sanctioned homeless rest stops right now. And that's where I live. I talk to a lot of people out there, and all reports are things are going well. The people living there, they kind of watch what's going on around them, and they've got every incentive to keep everything looking good and in good shape, and they provide an extra level of security for what's going on. And when we were doing we did our public forum, Dan Bryant told us about the effectiveness of the vehicle camping program that the St. Vincent de Paul one. And again, you got people, you put some eyes out into a largely industrial area that doesn't have anybody at night, who are sanctioned to be there, who are authorized, checked out. Maybe they can provide some security and be able to make the call to say, hey, somebody's going through the dumpster and spreading it all over the place. And maybe actually citing a few people there could help the problem with the people who are not supposed to be there and are trashing it and making it kind of bad, I hope. I've got the same question about if the sworn officer issue was put, or language was put in there for a specific reason, or just happened to be put in. And thanks, Deb, for the comments. What can you say?
Okay. I picked up on essentially 2 things that were there. I mean, one is the thing about pot users, and there seems to be in a time of supposed declining resources where we have to let people go. I mean, looking back to how marijuana became a problem in this country, Richard Nixon needed a campaign issue to divide the country and, be the law and order guy. Combined with Seagrams and Gallo and Anheuser-Busch and Coors and other people like that seeing marijuana as a competitor to their products, we now have this drug war. But again, is it the same class? Is possession of marijuana the same as violent offenses? Somehow I think we need to look at that a little bit more closely. The other thing that came up is what was said, I guess, by Steve, which is do more things. In terms of solving the homeless problem, there's a continuum of things that we can do. One is we can pick them off with 22s from the bluff, like some high school kids on the football team did north of San Diego. Okay. The other one is we can house them, like they do in Canada. In the cases where they get pulled into the health system. So there's a lot of ground in the middle, and one of the problems that we have in Eugene is that if you sleep on public property, it's a camping ban violation, and if you sleep on private property, it's criminal trespass too. So somehow that covers all the possible cases. I don't know how else you describe it. So unless some, do more things about finding the middle ground, I mean, maybe what we want to do is to find more places where we can put rest stops that seem to be working reasonably well, or put opportunity villages that seem to be working reasonably well, as opposed to chasing them out of the locations. And I would hope that the business community will begin to realize that if we actually solve the problem, rather than chasing them from place to place to place, there are better solutions available. And I thank you for your comments, and I hope that you'll, get involved and so in some way they either get employed or housed or given a place where they can exist legally. But that's, something has to give somewhere. And I thank you very much for your comments and bringing it here. That's enough.
I have a couple of 4 items to share with you, Commissioners. First one is, those of you who have families, those of you who have young children, I count myself in that. I have a beautiful, strong, smart girl. And whenever somebody loses a dad or a mom, the whole community loses. So with that, I'd like to take just a moment of silence, because this is a parent that the department, but also the city lost. Thank you. In a couple of conversations I had with the fallen officer, he said, "I know your name, I respect your work." And in turn I said, "I know your name, and I know what you're trying to accomplish." And that says something about somebody who really cares for the community. My blessings and my prayers to his family and friends. I had a very nice conversation with the local chapter president, NAACP, who was hoping that this body could consider changing or adjusting the actual title of the policy to actually be racial profiling. And I thought he will be here tonight. And 2 other panelists have mentioned the same thing, but I will let them, in fact, come forward. The unhoused is something that our community cares about. I will tell you that everybody has to have the opportunity for economic development. When somebody is trying to employ families, we have to do what we can to, in fact, enable that. I've seen some folks that have no business, trashing somebody's business. I also have been involved with addressing some of the issues with people that unfortunately are unhoused. So I will encourage all of you, if you have any better solutions, come forward. We regularly have 2 councilors at this place and the city council. But I will encourage you to come from your heart and understand the situation. I had had some very good conversations with people like Ali Valkyrie, downtown. And we, in fact, I mentioned that because of one person, it messes up for the rest of us. And I have been a homeless person, so I know that we knew who that person was. It's really messing things up for the rest of us. And I get that. So they themselves have taken charge, and I've seen that happen. So keep that in mind when you're talking about the unhoused. The inconsistencies in the application of the law, as it was presented by Dr. Fridge, I've seen that quite a few times, and I'm surprised that this hasn't been, in fact, front and center with all the elected officials. It seems to have a negative impact, and it continually sends the wrong message. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
I also wanted to express my condolences to those in the department that Mr. Humphreys. I did have the chance to meet with him several times, and Willie Edward as part of the union leadership, and found him to be an articulate and nice gentleman. So I'm sorry for that loss. I appreciate all of our public speakers that came and took the time out of their schedules to come to our meeting tonight and express their thoughts and concerns about the work that we're doing and other issues in the community.
Thank you. I'd like to echo that. I appreciate our faithful that come here and try to point out to us, praise us when we do well, and point out our shortcomings. So I thank you for doing that. And I appreciate some of the comments from people who have, experienced this on both sides firsthand. This has been an issue we've dealt with as a commission on the homeless situation and how the police interact with it, and that's an economic status. And it does impact this policy in some ways, and at the same time, we would like to be specific as to what classes we are trying to protect from bias in our city. So I am understanding the request to change the definition, purpose, and scope of this. But I would like to point out that we added something last time in the first paragraph. And initially, the first sentence sets out the tone of this policy, and it says that unequivocally, bias-based policing by the Eugene Police Department will not be tolerated. So the whole department is encompassed in this policy. But at the end, we've also added or provide law enforcement service. So it's not just police officers who make contacts, but also employees who might be at the front counter or out in the field providing some service to the public in some way. And that kind of thing, I think, encompasses in great detail. So I don't know that we need to change the word sworn department members, because that addresses attending to the sworn department members and how they will deal with people in their contacts and stops. And most people who do other type inside the police department, other type work, don't deal with stopping people and contacting them to get personal contacts with it. And their observations and what causes them to stop. This policy deals with that probable cause, reasonable suspicion, things like that that only police officers do. So I'm okay with this, is my point. I guess I spent a lot of time saying that, but that's my point. And again, thank you. So unless somebody else says anything, we can move on to stops data committee report, but he's not here yet, so we can skip that item on the agenda and move to questions for Chief Kearns. Now, the report is included in your packet, and there's a lot of data and information in there. Okay. Perhaps we want to not go into that.
Timing's everything, bro.
Judge Leonard, can you join us?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Right here.
Just so happens you walked in right when your item has come up on the agenda.
Well, great.
Yeah.
I thought it was 6:10, but this is good.
Good.
We're looking to my data.
I have some stuff about the policy,
All
but I
these
guess we
speeds, Thank you. Now, moving into stops data committee report, and we're going to go ahead and get Judge Leonard to give us a report. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I'm not sure how much I'm going to be able to add to what I mentioned at the last meeting, where you had the panel on racial profiling. But I will go into perhaps a little bit more detail, and if you have questions, please don't hesitate to ask. Captain Sam Kamkar and I serve as the co-chair of the committee, and it has been a committee the committee has been referred to as the Stops Data Committee. I'm also aware that perhaps Stops Data is maybe the incorrect term from a research standpoint. Variables might be the better term, but whichever it is the information that will be collected in the project that the EPD is initiating, and is going to be part of the implementation of the new computer system. The charge of the committee was to make recommendations to EPD as to what information should be collected, so that information could be used, could be analyzed to answer questions about stops that are made, about the nature of stops, about whether there is some either express or implied bias in the stops that police officers make. And we took that charge on in November, had a series of meetings to take a look at, first of all, the operations of police officers, to find out a little bit more about what they do and what they face when they're on the street making stops of individuals. and talked about this from both a law enforcement perspective and also from a community perspective. The committee is significant in its makeup. Committee, as I mentioned, was Captain Sam Kankar and myself as chairs. We're non-voting members of the committee. Officer Jed McGuire and Officer Greg Magnus from EPD were on the committee. Joan Kemps, EPD Records and Data Manager. Mark Isner, the police auditor. Yvette Alex Asenso, the Vice President for Equity and Inclusion at the University of Oregon. Michael Kerrigan, Community Alliance of Lane County. Dave Fidanki, Executive Director of the ACLU for Oregon. Edward Olivos, Associate Professor and Department Head of Education Studies at the U of O. Jim Garcia, Chicano Latino Student Program Coordinator at LCC. Jane Waite, Equity and Diversity Specialist with Lane ESD. Linda Hamilton, who's a correctional counselor with Lane County Parole and Probation. Eric Richardson, the Executive Director of NAACP of Eugene, Springfield, and Lane County, and Remy Callalong, the Multicultural Equity Coordinator from the Bethel School District. So we met, tried to become a little bit better acquainted with what happens in the field, and talked about what it is we're going to do. We used as some guides in this the work that has previously been done, both in the state of Oregon and nationally. There is I'm not sure if you all are familiar with there are a lot of, it's the Law Enforcement Contacts Policy and Data Review Committee for the state of Oregon. It is a statutorily created committee that is headquartered at, staffed at Portland State, and it works to ensure racial equity in law enforcement activities. Both develops policy, also analyzes data, and also does training. Both the LECC, as it's referred to, and the United States Department of Justice have developed data points that they believe are appropriate in collecting information. They are not exactly parallel, and the work that we did used those as guides, but we, in our final product, expanded in a number of respects with what is recommended by both the LECC and the Department of Justice. On the LECC and the Law Enforcement Contacts Policy and Data Review Committee, Chief Kern sits on that. It's headed by retired Chief Justice Paul DeMunis of the Oregon Supreme Court. Dave Fidanki, who's on our committee, is also a member of that. There are a number of other committee members as well. So we discussed issues. We both discussed these issues in larger policy contexts, and we also discussed them with anecdotal context as to what has happened, what people have had, experiences people have had, experiences that have been reported to committee members, the sense of the community. My background is that I'm a retired Lane County Circuit Judge, was on the bench for 25 years, practiced law before that, was a municipal court judge for a period of time. Captain Kamkar's background includes doing trainings nationwide on racial profiling. So I believe that we had quite a bit of input from a fairly wide perspective from this community. And when we say this community, the community extends past the boundary lines of the city of Eugene and certainly includes Springfield, other jurisdictions, and the county as well. We discussed this, and we ended up with a product that articulated data points that we believe that the computer system that the EPD is purchasing from SunGuard should provide for. And we have also discussed this with the people at the Law Enforcement Contacts Policy and Data Review Committee, LECC, at Portland State, to get a sense of how our product, our result looks compared to what other jurisdictions, what other communities in the state of Oregon are doing. And it is anticipated that EPD will be looking at the LACC, perhaps for data analysis as data is collected. I'm not sure in your packet, Carter, in the packet is the commissioners have the list of the, yes, have the list of the proposed variables or data points. I'm not going to go through each one of those, but I'm going to talk a bit about what I think we did that may be of significance in providing some information that in the words of is it Brian, spacing on his name, Brian Renauer from the LACC, has said that may allow us to dig a little deeper, drill a little deeper into issues in this community as to whether racial profiling is occurring and in what situations and how we may want to address it. One of the things that we have done is we've drilled or provided a bit more providing for more information about the searches that may or may not occur when police stop individuals. That's an issue that the committee became aware of in a number of ways, from anecdote to the experience of other jurisdictions. And instead of just providing for a box to check as to whether a search occurred, we differentiate between whether it was a consent search, where a police officer says, "Can I search a car?" Or whether it was search incident to arrest, an inventory search, providing for where these stops and where the contacts occurred, the location, the time of day, the passengers, and we believe that that will address one of the points that I think received particular attention in our discussion about reports that have been received about whether police contact was perhaps overreaching, either to the driver of the vehicle or to passengers of the vehicle. We produced our final product in December, and the variables that you have, thank you for providing that, variables that you have in your packet were unanimously agreed upon by the members of the committee, and as I said, Captain Kemkar and myself were not voting members. That really probably gives you an overview of what we did. The committee is also charged with continuing to make recommendations to the police department. And I want to go back to say that our product were recommendations. Our charge was not to develop the variables or the data points. Our charge was to make recommendations. The ultimate product, the ultimate decision is one that is made administratively by the Eugene Police Department. From this point on, we will be continuing to work in making recommendations as to policy, as to data analysis. There are any number of items that have been discussed as possibly being work for the committee at the request of EPD. So with that, if you have any questions.
Tim.
Thank you for being here tonight and going over that with us, Judge Leonard. So is there a timeline? You mentioned that the committee might have continuing work on this subject matter.
Yes.
Is there a timeline or specific things that the committee will look at in the future?
Well, there is not a timeline as to what's going to be looked at what point. That's developing. You have to get the project up and rolling, and we have to have data to actually work with. The data that is going to be available is data that is probably going to take some period of time to really have enough to be able to analyze it, to be meaningful. I mean, you could take the data from 1 or 2 days and it's not going to tell you anything. And so our timeline is a bit in flux because we don't know when this is going to come online, and we don't know when we're going to have sufficient data. We have been working with, and as I said, there is discussion about contracting with the LECC to provide analysis, which I think would be very helpful. They do that. LECC does that for a number of jurisdictions in the state. And I'm not sure that we have it's not that I'm not sure. I know that we don't have the expertise to be able to do that. So we're going to have to look to some outside source.
Thank you.
So I'd like Carter has some further information.
Just quickly, later on this evening, when we look at the work of the STOPS committee, there is a timeline for including the commission over the next 18 months, which parallels the work that that committee will do based on a 12-month pilot program broken into 2 6-month points, so that after 6 months, there's a review and a release of whatever information we have, and a suggested commission role. At the end of 12 months of that pilot operating, an additional review, and then at that point, it rolls out to the full department. So we're talking about really roughly, presuming everything gets moving soon, that the program would be rolled out to the whole department in the fall of 2015. So just supplementing on what.
And one thing I didn't mention, but is I think very important to keep in mind is as we did our work and as we move forward, and that is that there are competing interests in the gathering of data. There is certainly the interest of police officers not to be overburdened by gathering data that keeps them from doing other business. As much as there was discussion about getting detailed information can be looked at as being intrusive by the public if a lot of questions are asked. For example, we discussed how officers were going to determine or list race and ethnicity. That's not a question you ask. It's a question that it's something that is done about as best as can be done is by observation. It's not necessarily the most accurate. But you have that competing interest between workload for officers, intrusion on the public, the need of the right and the need of the public to know what's going on. So we consider that. I don't think that tilted any decision as far as data points, but it's certainly something that I think we were mindful of in our work, and I would suggest that as you consider this, you be mindful of that as well. It's difficult, and officers, they're going from call to call, and they have a lot of work to do just on one stop doing paperwork, and now this is going to be an added bit of work.
Can I ask one follow-up question?
Yeah.
Does the collection of the data points have to be collectively bargained with the union?
I don't know. I have no idea.
That's why I'm to you, Carter.
So that's why I'm an outside person.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
What did Carter?
Carter answered in the affirmative.
Oh,
That does need to be.
I've asked.
Okay.
Yes.
I would imagine.
Okay. I have in the queue, I have Joe, and Juan Carlos, and Jim.
Okay, reading through this list, it appears to be only oriented to car stops. Is there any provision in the short or longer term for pedestrian encounters, particularly how data would be collected by bicycle officers?
That has been mentioned, and beginning the project, it's only car stops, but we're certainly aware that the data needs to be collected for other contacts as well.
Does the software run on smaller handheld computers that a bicycle officer might utilize?
I'm the wrong guy to ask.
Okay.
And if you mention the word computer, I definitely am the wrong guy to ask.
Okay.
Joe, would you like an answer to that?
What's that?
I saw Captain Barrett's hand go up.
Oh, that'd be great, yeah, thanks.
Right here.
Yeah, we do not have handheld devices for our officers for downtown, and we do not know when the funding will be available for that in the foreseeable future. Neither do the motorcycle officers either.
Okay. I guess on here, there's no mention at all of socioeconomic status. Was that discussed by the group? And
You know, I think we talked about it. That's a very difficult piece of data to collect in a traffic stop.
Well, it's not, yeah, I'm thinking about this, okay, this is intended initially as a traffic stop, but it is going to expand, I guess, to other things,
Well,
or
we
at least that's
certainly could look at-
my understanding.
But it's, you know, I'm not sure how you, and I can't recall with great certainty what was discussed at the committee, but I guess I would ask you maybe for a suggestion how you would collect that information, how a police officer would collect it in a contact with a citizen. How would they determine socioeconomic status?
Okay, I would do it very much like you've listed out in Section 5, going from, you know, apparently affluent to homeless on a scale maybe of five things, you know. Scruffy might be above homeless and, you know, whatever. So in other words, why did the officer stop that person? And was that a factor in their decision to say, well, these people don't belong here? Maybe they can say they don't belong here because they're black or they're Latino or whatever, but they can also say they don't belong here because they look homeless.
Well, I don't want to belabor that one, but I think it's tough. If I'm like this today because I was sitting as a judge in Corvallis. If you'd have caught me yesterday when I was at Jerry's and my truck was dirty and I hadn't shaved for a couple of days, and I was in some pretty raggedy clothes, and I got stopped, I certainly looked different yesterday than I looked today. And so it's one of those things where when you rely on officers' observations, it is subject to a lot of subjectivity that may or may not be accurate. And I think that as much as there's a lot of information that certainly would be helpful, there is a good portion of that that's very difficult to accurately capture by observation.
So, in other words, you consider yourself working class because you don't change your clothes to go to the Home Depot?
I don't go to Home Depot, I go to Jerry's.
Okay.
But
okay.
No, I'm just saying by appearance. If you were to look at by appearance, you know, appearances don't always.
Yeah, because I relate that in personal experience, and I mentioned this at the last meeting. When I was an undergraduate in Boston, the Boston police, so this is back in the early 70s, for some unknown reason to me, began doing ID stops for anybody who looked like a hippie. And that went on for several months until there was enough outrage that the policy was ended. So that's, you know, if you were wearing jeans and had long hair, you know, the Boston police were going to stop you every chance they got. And, you know, is that, for example, today we seem to have people who claim that that's going on with the homeless. So is there some way to get the, you know, or at least I'm suggesting that you bring back to your committee that that's something to look at?
Well, we certainly can talk about it. And I don't really want to, since I don't speak for the thoughts of the members of the committee, I'm only interjecting my responses. I think that there is some information that is going to be, that would be very difficult to accurately capture.
Yeah, and then one final item. When I read through this initially, in number 9, the word consent. I doubt sincerely that anybody says, oh, please, Mr. Officer, search me. Consent is, I think, at best given grudgingly, because it takes time for that to occur, and, you know, it is an imposition. So is there some other way that consent, because, you know, one of the things that's come up, for example, is a number of times I've listened to folks complain about officers searching homeless kids downtown for pot. You know, it starts out as a conversation, and then it's is it okay if I search you? And, you know, they're looking for pot, you know, and then they're going to nuke the kid for it. And that's occurred a lot. So the question is, in terms of consent, they don't really have a choice, because the choice that they're given is either I search you now or I take you down the station and we search you there. Take your pick.
I'm not sure that's true.
You're not? Well, that seems to be how a lot of the people perceive it under those circumstances.
Okay. But I don't think that's necessarily true. And a consent search is is a legal term if you look at
Yes.
how it's applied if a search were litigated in court. There also certainly are consent searches where somebody says, a police officer may say, "Can I look in your backpack?" And somebody says, "Sure," and there isn't coercion. I understand that there certainly are people who feel coerced and in fact are coerced. But in using that term, we are using that in the legal sense where somebody consents, and you may have somebody can have any number of reasons why they decide to consent, but if they do consent, it is listed as a consent search. I'm not sure how else you would take up that issue. I'm not sure how else you could have a police officer record that.
Well, you could break it into consent happily and consent reluctantly at a minimum. Okay, thank you.
And I think that again gets into subjectivity on the part of the police officer, and you don't want that. I don't think you want a police officer being able to assign some value to that. It has a legal significance. It is litigated all of the time in court.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Ken. And Marcos, and then Jim, and Jesse, and James, and we're going to be getting to the next segment here in about 7 minutes, so please remember that. Thank you.
Judge Leonard, thank
Yes.
you for taking the time to come and
Thank you,
share your
Marcos.
thoughts and the results of the committee. Before I go into my questions and feedback on this, I want to once again express how I am concerned about how all this section came about. Basically, the chief said, I'm going to put together a committee that I'm going to handpick for the reasons to do this. The police commission was not informed until afterwards. The police commission, in essence, didn't have any control of that committee. Now we're just being asked to accept those recommendations. I'm not diminishing the work and the hard work that all of you have put together in this, but I want to make sure that we distinguish how we're making and establishing a precedent that I think it may be a dangerous one. Having said that, I think that the work has been done great. I would like to know more about the attendance of the actual committee. It seemed like it was well-rounded in terms of what the chief wanted to accomplish, whether or not Captain Kemkar has been active. And but I'll stop there, and hopefully we have more time to ask the actual questions. Attendance, did everybody attended all the meetings?
No. Attendance varied we were on a relatively short time frame, and so we did our best we could. Carter worked very hard in trying to find dates where we could get the greatest attendance. So, but with a number of, as I think we're all aware, with trying to assemble committees or groups of people, we couldn't get 100% all the time. Captain Kamkar was present at all of the committee meetings, and until I don't think we had any meetings. We may have had one meeting after he went back to training at the FBI Academy.
So all of these points that you're presenting here, I know this is basically the result, but I know you had a long list of things to go by, and I'm sure there was quite a bit of back and forth, and not having any kind of copies of the notes or minutes. I assume that there's some kind of either an agreement base or consensus base or whatever that might be, but I was curious in number 3, what it says initial purpose of the stop. I was curious why also not capture when the officer identified, at what point the officer identified the infraction or the possible criminal activity in this case and steps. What I mean is, if an officer makes an observation here, but I'm hearing from the community that the person was stopped on the other side of town, why is that not captured here, or why was not considered? So we hear that, a person was followed, for a while and then stopped. So although this is actually obviously important to know the initial purpose of the stop, that's great. I definitely want to make sure that's there. But I'm afraid that that other thing is not captured at all, and I was wondering why, since, in terms of the makeup of the committee members, that was one of their main concerns for years.
Well, I'm searching my memory, Juan Carlos, about that, and I think I can just recall a number of points that were made, that there isn't necessarily a point in time in all stops when you can where a police officer can identify that he is going to stop somebody. And it may be something that evolves over the course of blocks or distances. And I'm not sure that was something that, it didn't receive a lot of conversation if we did talk about it. Carter's remembering nothing. I mean, I know Carter remembers a lot. She doesn't remember anything about that. And I don't think that was, we did talk about how stops come about. In fact, we even had a couple of patrol officers sort of put together a mock stop for us so we could see what it looks like. But again, it wasn't something that received much attention, if at all.
I am curious about your comments earlier about the competing interests and how, and I don't know whether you're presenting a possible recommendation or your perspectives, or that is coming from the committee in terms of time that it takes for the information to be entered. Certainly, my understanding after 5 years is this body will focus on making recommendations, and I know that it takes resources to do so, but in the end, we have to focus on what is it that we're trying to accomplish. We're really, as the chief will say, well, we're trying to see whether or not racial profiling exists within the department. And unless that data is entered, we're not going to know. And even after that, it will be up to how the data is analyzed and who's analyzed it, and whether or not it's made public. So I want to know whether that's coming from you or coming from the committee in terms of the perspective or the actual recommendation.
Well, it's something we talked about, that police officers have a lot to do. They stop somebody, they have, if they're going to fill out a citation, they have to fill out a citation, they're filling out a citation. There may be other calls, there may be other concerns. A traffic stop is not going to be the only thing that they do on, that stop is not going to be the only thing they do on their shift. They have a lot of work to do. And it was discussed that if one citation, one stop is going to eat up an inordinate amount of time, it is at the expense of them being available to do other work. So yes, that was a consideration. And I just offered that because I wanted to put in context that given the importance of the importance of information that is being collected so it can be analyzed, it can't be something that becomes the only thing a police officer does while he or she is out on patrol. It is one of the things among many in a particular shift. So there is that competing interest, and there's just as the competing interest of the citizens not to have intrusive questions asked, or to have a stop last longer than something than a person would expect it would reasonably take to be stopped, issued a citation, and go on their way.
Thank you for clarifying that that was not a recommendation from the committee. Thanks for your work.
Thank you.
Okay, we've actually reached the end of the time for this particular segment, but I wanted to, I have Jesse and James in the queue. And as the committee, we want to suit your time. I'd like to get a motion to extend this segment for another 10 minutes.
Point of order.
Go ahead.
Or future, what we've done is that I think that we need to start limiting time that commissioners have in order to speak, because what happens is that we get involved in a conversation and it leaves out all the other commissioners. They don't get a chance, and then we go and say that, okay, well, we need to put more time on. I'm not about, for adding more time to it, let's stick to the agenda. But we need to be mindful that others and stuff are in the queue too and not engage in a conversation and stuff. So that's all I have.
Thank you.
A motion to extend time, got 10 minutes?
We have a motion to extend time by 10 minutes. Have a second.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
But I'd
Opposed?
like to ask our panelists, or Mr.
Yeah,
Leonard here,
yeah,
if that's okay with him. I mean,
Exactly.
Sure, I'm fine with that.
You're not going fishing, are you?
No, I am going out to
Jerry's?
dinner with my wife, but,
Okay.
no, I did Jerry's yesterday.
Okay, motion carries. We're going to go in for another 10 minutes. So Jim, you next.
Well, my initial question was going to speak to time, but you pretty much covered that here, and I think you covered it very well, and I'm glad, and I'm very happy that you did look at both sides. I hadn't even thought of the intrusion of time into people's lives and asking those questions, so I'm glad that was looked at too and brought up here. But then as you were talking, I was wondering, since this is only relating to an actual traffic stop, a lot of the policy that's written includes more than just traffic stops. So what I'm concerned is, are we violating the policy by only looking at this, or is it okay because it's just a pilot and it's going to build up to that? That I don't have an answer to that, but it kind of conflicts with what we have in the policy. I just kind of wanted to bring that to you, and I don't know if you've read the policy, but it talks about all. I know you probably.
That's outside my job
That is
description.
outside, so I.
Carter is graciously
Okay.
answer.
The policy basically says the department is not to have bias-based policing, period. One of the tools that will help the department figure that out is collecting data, and where they are starting with collecting data is in traffic stops with this program that's in the process of working on. That's the piece that the judge and the committee is working on, is that data collection system. The policy that you're reviewing is department-wide, bias-wide, and in the area of traffic stops and the data variables that you picked here, you've got the data tools to determine what is happening. You don't have the data tools necessarily for all the other bias that happens. Doesn't make it any less okay. So the policy is bigger than just what the pilot program is, and I think it's not inconsistent. It's just that the pilot is only a subset of all of the bias in the world.
Okay. I'm good, thanks.
Anything?
I'm done, yes.
Okay, Jesse.
Okay, a few short questions here. Is this information going to be part of the regular police report, such that when a defendant orders discovery, this is going to come with it?
I'll look at Carter, but I don't anticipate that it is going to be. I don't know that.
So it would have to be requested separately?
There would have to be a records request. Go through the proper channels.
All right. Are passenger searches, the type of passenger search, going to be recorded?
I don't know if we broke that out. Let me take a look. Carter, can you recall?
I think it's only the initial search.
Yeah.
There's only if there's an arrest.
No, arrested, cited, detained, searched, or patted down in number 7.
Section 7.
Yeah, I see that.
And you collect information on the passengers if they're arrested, cited, yes.
Information on them, but not the type of search that led to it? Okay, and did you guys start with the mandate that it was only going to be vehicle stops? Because bicycle and person stops happen from police vehicles as well.
This project was only to collect data points as part of traffic stops.
Okay, thank you.
I think the rest of and again, I don't want to speak, I can't speak for the department, but this is the beginning. This is the start of what at least I'm of the belief is going to be a larger, probably more comprehensive collection of information in different aspects of police work at a later time, but that remains to be seen. And that's not a charge of our committee. Again, our committee had the task of making recommendations as to the variables or data points to be collected for the pilot project.
Thank you.
Okay, I have James and Claire.
Yeah, well, I'll make mine really first. Judge, thanks so much for being here. I appreciate that. Just
Can't think of any place I'd rather be on
I know.
a spring night like this
I'm with you too.
than with you guys.
Yeah, I know. So that I kind of understand now, we're talking about two different things here. We're talking about the data collection method, and we're also talking about the policy. They're separate. Okay, so I want to make sure that I understand it, because it seems like the conversation was like they're tying in together some kind of way, but they're separate. They're separate systems. One is a policy on conduct, and the other one is a data collection concept.
Yes.
Okay, so thank you for that. One of the things that I was thinking about is that as we go through and talk about all of the methods and concepts of collecting data and stuff, it occurs to me that historically there are fundamental foundations that already have these tools already in place. So, for example, I'm pretty sure down in Florida they have some type of policy and have those tools in place and stuff. Larger metropolitan areas and stuff. Why are we trying to reinvent the wheel? And I'll just leave it at that.
Well, I can tell you that I'm not sure we were trying to reinvent the wheel. We were trying to maybe create a wheel that runs a little bit more smoothly and is a little bit more productive. We've looked at and been made aware of data collection points in a variety of locations. We're certainly not the first community in the state of Oregon to do this, and nationwide, there are many places that have done this. I think one of the things we have done is benefit from their experience, and as I said, we added a bit more than what is being done in jurisdictions in the state of Oregon, especially as to searches, thinking that is going to be, that addressed a concern that was raised, and that's perhaps going to provide us some better information that will lead to better policing and better service to the community. But no, we didn't reinvent the wheel. But I think we were very fortunate to have the experience of these other jurisdictions and to use them and to be able to make it how it best fits Eugene. We could have taken what Corvallis does. That fits Corvallis. Maybe it doesn't fit here. Portland does it. Maybe it doesn't fit here. So that's what we did.
Okay. Thank you.
I mean, I just have to say, with the members on the committee that we're fortunate to have, I think it was a very, very, we're very mindful of, made mindful of concerns, of needs, of perhaps some mistakes that have been made with both Dave Fidenki being on the committee. Mark Gessner has had a lot of experience around the country and brought to our attention what other jurisdictions are doing. So far, it appears to be a pretty thoughtful project. It's certainly not perfect, and that's what this and other discussions are about, but we've got to start.
Thank you. Thank you, Judge.
Hi, just a quick comment. Hi, Judge, thanks
Hi.
for being here. Sorry I came in late to your presentation,
You didn't miss much, I'm sure.
Definitely. So just on what you were saying about folks who've been on the committee, and maybe just a little comment to remind us why the search piece is of particular importance, that the Law Enforcement Contacts Committee at the state level has been collecting data from Oregon State Police, Corvallis, and the other jurisdictions that gather it. And what they were finding in that analysis was that there wasn't a great deal of difference between who was being stopped, but what was found was very different after the stop in terms of who was subject to a search in terms of race and ethnicity. And so I think that's an important piece, and I'm glad that it's a part of here. But Jesse's question led me to look at number 9 and the question of whether What happens to the passengers is recorded. Number 9 doesn't make it clear that the kind of search data point is limited to the driver and not to the passengers. So I don't know if there's more need to clarify that, but right now it's just ambiguous in terms of who that applies to.
In almost all situations, the search is going to be something that starts with the driver, unless there's some exigent circumstances, seeing a weapon, seeing some contraband, something like that, that is not in the area where the driver may be. I think it's a good point to bring to the attention of Chief Kearns as this is rolled out. Carter, do you have any more recollection of the scope of that discussion as we talked about passenger searches?
It's right now designed to be one question, so one checkbox, so you'd only be able to have one search, which would be the initial search, not subsequent searches.
And it wouldn't necessarily matter whether it was the driver, the passenger, or the vehicle.
I do not believe it would matter. And we can make it as clear as it needs to be, we can.
To be a useful guide,
Okay. Good point, thank you.
That was it.
I wanted to ask the commissioners if they feel need more time on this. We certainly want to give it the proper time to consider these data, but we can bring it up again. Probably will. This is an ongoing process, so, but if we're okay, we'll move on to the next item. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your work. I'm going outside.
Enjoy dinner.
Yeah, rub it in.
Okay, we reached the next item on our agenda, and this is related to the report that's included in your packet, and any other questions you might have for administration. Captain Deere is here representing Chief Kearns tonight, so please feel free. I'll start with you. Jesse?
It seems like this is going to be collecting potentially exculpatory evidence that's in the hand of the state or the city. This is Brady material, and it should be part of the police report and part of any discovery fulfillment. I don't want to have to make an extra request, and it seems like this needs to be discovered out there. What good is it going to be if it's held tightly within the police department? And more specifically, it's information being collected about defendants that their lawyers have a right to have. I'm going to stick with that one right now.
Okay. Next. Any other questions? Tamara?
So I see on the chief's activities that one of the things he did was looks like he attended a security forum, school safety and dangerous acts of violence. Has there already been any discussion in the department since the school stabbing yesterday about school resource officers? I guess what came out of that was it looked like the school resource officers that were stationed at that school were prepared for a shooting scenario, but not so much for a stabbing scenario, which they may have responded to differently. Has there been, or do you think there will be more discussion about the safety in schools around that incident?
Yes, and I know I talked to the school resource sergeant, and we teach active shooters, but whether it's an active shooter or somebody with a knife, they're an imminent threat, and that's what we really teach on. Not knowing much about the story, I was busy yesterday and just got glimpses of it, and not really being able to talk fully through the agency, but I think we address, again, the threat. Whether it's a firearm, it's or a knife, is something that we're trained to go after that, so.
Thank you.
One call, and then myself.
Am I next right away? Okay. Well, the chief is not here, but in his chief activities, he mentions LULAC anti-profiling committee. It's actually LULAC anti-racial profiling committee. Maybe he can make a note of that. Here's a quick comment. He's now made a point of kind of sharing with the commission about personnel and opening positions. That's actually been very helpful because I've been able to kind of tell a few folks out there on the different positions. So they're looking ahead in the personnel and in the update. That has been very helpful. And a couple of people have said that they were actually interested in applying. So, yeah.
Okay, we have James. And then Claire. Okay.
Were you going to go first?
No, it's okay.
Okay.
I didn't see your hands up, so I'll go after you guys.
Okay. Just a question. This is kind of come back to one of the questions or comments that were given by the public and stuff. You know, when you're talking about the instance where we have people in high-profile positions and stuff found in violation and kind of get a slap on the wrist with the same, that's what the appearance is or the perception is. And then we have a youth or, you know, one of the kids around that has small amounts of marijuana on them, and then they ran through the system. Do recall that even at the federal level, they are pulling back on that type of activity. It was a good point bringing out, talking about war on drugs, which didn't do anything but increase the line of pockets of private industry, Wackenhut and places like that that created their own private prisons and things like that. And then maybe it's a comment that may be considered for city council and stuff. You know, when you have some child or a teenager out there with a small amount of marijuana, a joint or something like that. I know when I was a police officer, I came up on some kids and they had, you know, small bag of marijuana. I made them dump it out instead of taking them and put them in the system. I didn't think that that was the right thing to do. It's the officer's call, of course, but in view of what they're doing at the federal level, is this something, and it goes back to the point where, you know, they're doing a triage and you let a convicted felon out and he goes on a killing spree and say that there's no room in here for him, but yet we can lock up some kids for some marijuana. At some point, we're kind of becoming an unbalanced society where this is really, you know, what are we doing? So perhaps it may be something that city council may take up, say, small amount of marijuana and stuff, you know, it's not a crime, and, you know, at best, take it away, do whatever you got to do and stuff, but let's not, you know, exacerbate make them part why we can't keep convicted felons, murderers in jail. Just a comment.
Thank you, James. Claire, and then myself, and then Jim and Tamara.
So on the police, on the chief's report, it's page 16 on the packet, on the PDF version. The area of focus, West 5th to West 11th, Taylor to Jefferson map. I was just curious what the two maps are showing us and if it's like a before and after. And then maybe a request to the chief, or maybe I'm not seeing this in the reports, of if we're seeing data pointing to crime in a certain area and we're deploying officers in a concentrated effort there, can we then see data afterwards to see what kind of results came from that work?
Yes, what you're seeing on the left-hand side is a 4-week look on the what's occurred in that area. And on the right-hand side, you're seeing officer activity and what happened during that reported period.
So the one green crime indicator is the one.
Right, so you're seeing in that area, so this was happening before, so during our focus area, there was only one reported crime in a week.
Okay, so I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Oh, go ahead.
I was just saying it might be helpful to have maybe additional labels on the map so we have a clearer picture of what we're looking at. Because for me, is this a 4-week look of 4 weeks on the left and then the following 4 weeks on the right, or is it all a 4-week period? Kind of how does the time work frame play out within these scenarios?
Right, so the one on the left is the 4-week prior to our initiative of deploying officers into the crime area. And this is the week while we deployed the officers. So that's the results after. So we said, here's our 4-week look at crime, and this is the results. The results is, this is prior to, and this is the results.
Okay.
So here it's showing that our results are showing that, you know, there's only one thing of crime, which is good.
Yeah.
But the other thing that we look at, just, you know, before we pat ourselves on the back and say we can do this everywhere, a lot of times we sometimes displace crime too.
Yeah.
So we do push it outward, which isn't seen in this map, but, you know, these are all set icons and stuff with the software mapping set and everything else.
So just maybe a small notation in there might be helpful to clarify what we're looking at, because I thought that's what we were looking at, but it wasn't completely clear.
And I think it was in there before, but what happens is, if you can scroll down, Carter, what happens, they put this time analysis in the bottom too. So we're also not looking at where it happened, but time of day and day of the week and the hours. So sometimes when we keep adjusting our maps and we keep adapting and trying to make it better, so sometimes things get pushed out, but I'll make a note to put that back in there.
Point of information, real quick. Well, we've still got that up. What do the handcuffs and cars and officers mean?
Okay, the officers mean a citation, and the handcuffs means that there was an arrest. FI stands for that there was a field interview being conducted there. Which the patrol car is a patrol check. So they check in the area on a patrol check.
Okay, thank you.
So I'll scratch Joe, and I have myself and then Jim. And I was going to jump in there on that one right after Claire said it. You know, we need to have maybe a little legend for the cute little symbols on there so we can figure out what we're looking at, and that would tell us, because I mean, when you look down, you see arrests and citations and that type of thing, you see numbers, but it does help to know what kind of activity. Speaking from my perspective, whenever I see these maps, I think about, we had a large number of break-ins in the Friendly neighborhood where I live, and the next thing I know, on crimereports.com, I start seeing a lot of proactive policing, just as a PP symbol, and started stopping people all around the neighborhoods, you know, just checking with them, going out, stepping out, asking them, what's going on, you live around here, that kind of thing, you know, friendly questions, I'm sure. And behold, no more burglaries. It's just like a miracle, you know, it's like that stops it. Well, guess why? Because they're going somewhere else probably. But the point being, I think your proactive police force is what you are hoping for, so you didn't end up with the latest crisis du jour that we're seeing on the news every single day now. The one like before last that was dragged out of her, well, not dragged, she ran out of her house and was beaten in her driveway and had a neighbor intervene. I think would have been stabbed to death by this guy who got his hands on a knife. So, you know, each day I cringe to think about people walking to their apartment after studying at U of O, and they're hijacked and put into the trunk of their car. I mean, it's just, these are, you want the police to be active in your neighborhood, believe me. You want them checking people out, finding out what they're doing in that neighborhood. That's what prevents crime. It's a lot better to prevent it than to react to it, believe me. Okay? So that was my 2 cents worth. Thank you. Jim, and then Tamara.
Can I just add for clarification, and I didn't mention this before, but just so you know, we have a DLP meeting every Wednesday, and I run the DLP, and so this is an actual one of our slides. So it's taken from our DLP. So it makes sense to us in there, but it might not make sense here. So I'll make sure we add those in there.
Thank you.
I figured you were using these as a work product, and
Yeah.
we're giving them to us for some information.
Okay, Jim?
Well, Carter, you can stay right there because my questions are on the same slide. And Claire kind of took some of my questions out. What did you say, like the AR/CLC, what did that stand for?
That's for arrest, or CLC is the citation and move custody.
And which symbol would that relate to?
That would be the handcuffs.
The handcuffs. And the next one, the CIT UTC?
That's the police officers.
And what did that mean?
That was uniform citation, the traffic ticket.
Okay. And the other two I've got. And since you focused on this area, and maybe this is something you don't really want to divulge, but how many extra resources did you focus into this area to come up with the good results?
This is left up to, and again, in our DLP effort, this is a command level purview of where we're going to look at in crime, because we see trends and everything, and our analysts look at it, and we discuss it, and then it's up to each individual shift it's not like we bring people in for overtime, but it's based on shift by shift and by the sergeant. So every day there's a briefing in there. If they have extra manpower or people power, they can put those resources in there. And again, they also look at the time of day too. So it depends is what the answer is, but it's up to each individual sergeant. And the other thing is that we also give our sergeants the leeways, just because, we take a look at this 4-week crime, if they're not having continued crime there, we're just not gonna flood resources in there when the problems go away. We tell them to adjust and move their staffing somewhere else to address the crime. So we just don't want to be fixed on what happened in the past, but it's also fluid for the future.
Okay.
So, but it's taking our resources allocated for the day on the shift.
Okay, great, thanks.
Okay, one quick question, okay.
Hi, so is there an upcoming award ceremony that I heard about? Can't remember, is it in April?
It's in May, it got changed, I think it's the second week of May or something.
Let me know, I'll let you know.
And is it Lieutenant Knapp?
Yes.
Is receiving an award, but he's not gonna be here, he's still gone, right?
Correct.
Oh, can you tell us about what he's receiving that award for?
He received the life-saving award. I do not know the particulars, but.
I learned that on Facebook.
I know what it is. I was just wondering if you knew.
All right,
He
so we're gonna-
he performed CPR on someone, gal who was, I think, drowning. Saved her life.
Good.
I just thought it should
Well,
say
that's good. Thank you. We'll take a break now, and we'll try to be back here in close to, by 5 after, how about that? A little 5-minute delay.
I know, I'm waiting.
And I'm reminded that the recording is still going.
So I saw that one. and I was like, they said they were staying till they ran out of money. I'm like, so how, aren't they coming back pretty soon? Oh, is it not?
Oh, sorry.
He'd
He'd already tapped your shoulder.
I think it's in something. No, it's.
Let's see. So,
I see this table don't assimilate to the U of O.
I don't think this.
Questions like a lawyer.
Why have to this?
Okay, yes.
This one has remove this phrase.
Yeah.
Questions on, because that's, you're right, they should-
And then
rather this all.
Yeah.
remove this later.
So this should be-
Replace it.
Oh, you're the guy from Florida.
Yeah, see that go on.
He goes, well, I can.
You should have to make a separate request for it.
Yeah.
But now I know you're
Send it
gonna,
to
but now every time you're gonna make sure they
We're
make a
gonna
separate
change
request for it, yeah.
We're gonna change the discovery request and send it back.
That one I know where you're coming from. Moving this away.
There you go.
That will not be.
He goes, but you're,
No.
yeah, so they're number 2.
What I'm trying, one of the things that we
Good or bad,
Oh, my son's
because
just-
this is really just getting a baseline. So
I
with the
didn't know
law
they
start,
had,
then you can determine,
bad
okay, what are
cases
your
that
goals?
had-
Here's where we're at. We're
I got mine at Best Buy.
This only goes for protected class.
It'll be interesting to see if the data comes in, like,
Yours is like a
how it
little,
comes in.
like,
Yes.
his
So
is
in other
like
words,
hard
Juan
back.
Carlos
Yours is
said
nice.
the claims is
Why we're talking, Hispanic people.
Oh, my husband's birthday's coming up, but
Or
like, he'd probably like to have that.
inclined to consent.
Yeah, I
Like
probably
have a keyboard on it.
Because they don't have the background.
So
Because
this
you said
like
you
it.
put
after
it
places
In their
this.
resume. Everybody says, I thought it was out of it. I don't think it's gonna-
No, what I was gonna do is break it into 3 pieces. Get rid of the first few
See,
people,
last year I bought him.
I've got the,
Take this
the
phrase
resolve
out.
and say no.
and then replace this with that.
That's the same in.
I used to think my phone was so full, and now I'm just like,
Get behind you.
slow sometimes. My eyes are going a little bit.
I was just reading.
All of it.
Like, what eyes are, my eyes are blurry. I know.
So Tamara, you are being an eligible player at
Oh, am I? Is that your, the run? Is yours? I didn't know that. Oh, yeah. With the Nancy Graham, with Nancy Graham.
Yeah, so we had a really good meeting with her.
I was like,
Walked past your office a few times.
oh, you did? See my name? And the only thing I said was, we've had lots of races out there.
But,
Most of the time, folks either know the facts or they know in different ways. But we had a race last fall, you know.
So we were out on White Arrows. We were a daytime race, and all our stuff got washed away. It was
Yeah, no, it wasn't you guys. It was later. I know. because we work with the U of O on that. Those guys that do that for children's rooms, they're amazing.
Believe it or not, they were starting.
I remember they call it, I don't know, one where they have the night race with the glow sticks and stuff. Those kids from the U of O, amazing, those guys that run the race. I mean, they're volunteer, and it takes a long, it's right before graduation, it's 35 hours. Having to do these planning activities, it's crazy. But, no, the last, out of the 5 years, that we usually had that campus, just only twice. And one was just like marking a flag path from a parking lot to like start.
Oh, yeah.
But this last time, did you walk around, of course, you saw the white arrows like spray painted. I said.
Where? All right.
White arrows, and we've had the U of O guys, it was them who did the loop just from the parking lot at the annex, from the parking lot to like start lighting. And they told us, oh no, it's paint washes off, it's not regular spray paint, it's like, it's not supposed to last very long, it's temporary. Well, that lasted like 6 months, but this white is obviously straight spray paint. And I'm like, I just have one request, they can do whatever they want, please do not spray paint arrows on our concrete. You have to snow, 2 snows and ice, you can still see them plain as day. But a lot of places use that runner's chalk, if you've done races before, they use the runner's chalk if it's raining, it's not so great because it rains hard, it washes away, but I think the stuff's still pretty good, but it washes away a lot faster. So I go, that's just my one request, no spray painting arrows. Or you can just use the ones that are already there. If it's the same course, I don't know what you're gonna do if it's a different course than that.
Yeah, no, last year we had Piper Ruiz, who's, professional, and she marked the course, and then Pam had to go back out in the morning to do it again because.
Oh, because you used runner's chalk.
Yeah, and the monsoon, but
Is that what they call it, monsoon? Oh, yeah.
That morning, so that was the last.
Not so great, yeah. Well, now, if you walk the course, you might already see all the white arrows spray painted where you need them. Now, if they're not, if you're doing a different course than where they're spray painted, we might have to talk about, you need to let me know so we can get them pressure washed off before your race, because you don't want people to get.
Yeah.
They might already be flagged for you.
Right. No, but it was.
Do not spray paint our concrete.
Excited about, so staging out of the ambulance.
Oh, yeah. That's probably the U of O guys do.
Yeah, so we walked around there and saw, and it's very funny because my husband worked for something.
Oh, he did?
Yeah, so I've only visited there a couple of times, and there was a piece of art in the cafeteria, I was like, that's a Sony.
That used to be behind the front desk. We did get so we kind of had to, felt like we had to keep it, but we didn't want it behind our front desk. So we put it in the cafeteria instead.
I thought it was
On an unobtrusive
I
wall.
forgot it was behind the front desk. It is. I'll just take a picture of it.
I was like, well, we probably should keep it since they donated it to us, but
They're all gone now.
we don't really want it. So we put it there. Nobody really notices it on the wall. I mean, you might.
I did, because I.
But most people sort of don't see it there.
So it was so funny, I was like, oh, now I know what camera it is.
Yes, I do. That's where my office is. My next time you're there, just knock on my door and see if I'm in. I've been busy filing my taxes and working on budgets. I've got real personal property taxes. It's just busy, so.
Oh my God.
Yeah, now they're volunteers, but
It is. It's hard to track. The equipment leases are especially hard because they've gone up places because there used to be local people where you could walk down there and you can help them understand. You have to get tax
How's things
statements into the document.
out of the credit union?
Pretty good. They were responsible for taxes.
Everything's in the car business.
Pretty good, pretty good.
Statutorily required tax savings.
People are out buying them again more now than they have been the last few years.
Yes, during those years, actually, that was kind of bad for our business because people buy a car and then, 2 years later it comes into our marketplace. And with the, with getting rid of the cash and junkers thing, that also took a lot off, so. But, we're getting to the point where there's a lot of older cars I'd rather not work on because you
So I'm on
do,
a health and wellness committee with Sarah.
you do one thing and then something else goes wrong and they say, well, how, why'd you
They're
break
very
that?
excited
It's like,
about
or they're getting hard to get parts for. That's one of the things. Vehicles that are hard to get parts for,
He used to be.
it's just, no matter how well you do it, you have to store the car, the customer gets, itchy, how come that part isn't in yet? Well, it isn't in because there's always a little problem. Are you sure you ordered it? Yeah, we
I just like
ordered
you guys, so I just kind of
it. We have to get stuff off of eBay. We actually buy stuff off of eBay for some of the older cars.
So you can't be there, you are, sorry. He's being cloned, and then I made a joke back saying, that's for sure.
Actually, we've been it's been real good on
It's one of our president.
eBay, yeah.
What the heck are those guys doing?
We can talk.
I was thinking they were like a ball, they didn't move, or they're like on a ball,
Yeah, so we haven't had any problems with that.
I know, they've been traveling for like a month.
No, they like saved all this money up and then they just said, we're going, we're taking up a job.
Sergeant Nat.
Oh, Sergeant. I said Lieutenant.
Well, he's
What is he? I couldn't remember.
their kids are the same age as my kids, and they've been friends that go to school
Yeah,
together.
they saved a
Like the
bunch of
people who
money.
are working in the offices or whatever, do they have to swear anything?
I don't know.
And they're literally traveling.
My sworn is
all
real
ages.
specific.
Every
People who have a badge.
All their Facebook pictures of all the
So
places
this,
they're going.
okay, so let me just get something straight in my head with you. Okay, so devices provided by the Eugene Police Department will not be tolerated.
I guess.
So this is
I think
just,
that would be the whole department.
but none of this, the rest of the stuff doesn't apply to this. And I'm just trying to like, it's just confusing to me.
Amazing stuff all over the world.
But I guess energy, even though it's only unpure and temporary.
Hey, you shaped and I barely recognized you. And when I first saw you there, I went, hey, who's that? Oh,
I know you couldn't handle the competition anymore.
So sworn members who do this, or,
Okay. No, I have a question.
you're right, you're right.
It's not clear.
You're right, it doesn't.
What's that now?
Okay, so can you bring that up
Luncheon yesterday, we got
to?
this new,
Yeah.
Well, it's her idea.
I know,
I saw your note, I think. I didn't read all of it as closely as I could yet, but
I wonder if Claire saw
perused it.
I read through it, I'll read through it more deeply, and I'll send you a response.
I must tell you,
Kitty answered
I'm getting a great deal of input.
I bet you are.
I'm getting a
Me
great
too.
deal of input. And I'm gonna leave it at that right now.
I'm getting some too, Mike.
I know.
Now, let's get back to,
And I'm pro MX, but it's
the
still
agenda,
my back
please.
to business and out West 11th. What they're doing. Just sure.
George, you provide sick time,
No, I'm talking about
I do provide sick time, yes.
so,
Sick time / vacation.
yeah.
Okay, we're into
That works.
item 7 on the agenda, which is professional stop policy, and everybody has a copy of the newly revised with changes evident in the electronic version. I've got them underlined here,
Actually, Steve
but
Mattel
they're
sent me
also in the
some.
packet
I'm still pondering this.
with, is Matt still here?
Is yours?
Lieutenant, okay. So, if you have any questions of the administration, I guess Matt will be back shortly, or Captain Burr can answer any other questions, not specifically related to this, maybe, but on policy. So we have the changes in front of us here. Does everybody have a chance to look at them? Does anybody need a little bit longer to do that? Okay. Well, let's get to work then. I'll start at Q, and if anybody had comments, Joe? Who else? Joe, you're first, so go ahead.
Okay. Let's see. In section 402.2, the policy, in the second paragraph, this one's been reworked quite a bit over time, and I still think it needs a little bit of work, so I'm going to suggest 3 changes, and I'd like to do it as 3 separate motions.
All right, make your first motion, please.
My first motion is that the first sentence of the second paragraph be removed. It does not add anything meaningful to the policy.
Would you state that sentence, please?
The sentence is, while the Eugene Police Department expects its officers to make citizen contacts and ferret out criminal activity, it is equally committed to providing equitable law enforcement services to the community with due regard for the protected class status of those served. That's essentially covered in the second and third paragraph. So I would like to just see that entire sentence be taken out.
Could you repeat the number again? I'm sorry, sir.
Okay, it's policy 4022.
Okay.
Okay, 2.2,
Thanks.
and it is the first sentence of the second paragraph. The purpose, again, to state, is that by removing that sentence, we remove the redundancy from the paragraph.
Okay, you've heard the motion, we have a second.
Second.
Second by Claire. Discussion. Start from Keith here. Discussion. Claire?
Well, I can just say, I think that is a good motion. I think I think one of the challenges we always have with policy is length and repetition, and unless someone can see why we really need to have that particular sentence in there, I actually think it helps clean up the paragraph and gets right to the point of the policy. Assuming we keep in most of the rest of the language in that section.
First sentence in this paragraph. So,
Mr. Chairman, point of information on the motion.
point of information stated.
Would that, the last sentence, the department would provide equal protection, would that remain on paragraph?
You mean at the end of the thing?
Yes, he's just proposing to take out that.
Take out the first sentence of the second one, but not the second and not the third sentences.
Okay, I will definitely be behind that.
Okay, put myself in the queue here. Is anybody else before me? I don't want to. So I'm thinking that I'm not seeing it anywhere else in the policy that provides direction to the officer on the intent of the police department expecting them to make contacts. Not finding that anywhere else in the policy. And I'm concerned that, it takes away a message that they might want to deliver to the department that they need them to make these contacts. So I don't know if we can't leave one part of this, at least leave the first part of that sentence in, and then, maybe take out the part that's onerous about committed to providing equal protection, equitable treatment, and because the rest of the policy does actually address that.
Okay. So what you'd like to do is to leave that first thing, put a comma, and make that the introduction to the second sentence?
Correct, yeah.
I consider that to be a friendly amendment.
Okay. We accept that.
Carter needs to get that down.
Tell me what you're doing again.
Yeah, I understand what you're
either.
saying.
Leave the first part which says, while the Eugene Police Department expects its officers to make citizen contacts, comma, and then go to the next sentence.
The
which is,
department will provide equal protection.
of the law. So
Yeah.
eliminates a lot of
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
intermediate stuff, but still allows them to give direction to the people and what they expect from them.
I would accept
We
that.
accept that, okay. Motion is now amended to that language. Anybody have any other discussion on this? Okay, I'll call for a question. All in favor of the motion as amended, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Carried unanimous.
Okay, that's number one. Number two, motion number two, in the second sentence, which is now the second half of the first sentence, I would like to strike the phrase, "to the people we contact," after the word law. So the entire sentence will read, while the Eugene Police Department expects its officers to make citizen contacts, comma, the department will provide equal protection under the law and provide it fairly and without discrimination toward any individual or group.
Okay, so that's in a broader sense is what you're asking for. So we have a second to that.
I'll second.
Seconded by Claire.
Can you restate that? I didn't understand what you were saying.
He took out the we contact and.
Okay, thank you. Yes, thank you.
So it's not dealing with the contact specifically, it's dealing with the broader concept of all people,
Yeah.
period.
Mhm.
Mike, you're first in the queue, who else?
I'm tempted to want to not support that motion, and the reason is because, well, I agree with you that that should be a larger mission statement sort of principle. This is a particular policy directed about contacts, and so I want to have a particular statement about what the expectations are around contacts, and that everyone will be that's contacted is entitled to equal protection under law is a piece that I kind of want to leave in.
Anyone else? Anyone else? Tamara?
I'm just concerned that this is a short policy already. It's on a very important topic. And now we're carving out more language that's not really providing guidance or saying what we do and do not want the officers to do when they have contact with our citizens or our community members. So I'm just concerned that we're taking out this word here and that word there and this sentence here, and that's not really leaving any meat in the policy. I don't see any reason to take that out. I agree with Mike's comments.
Okay, Joe, as the maker of motion, you want to defend the position here. Maybe you could explain why you...
Okay. My thinking is that the first paragraph in this section covers it covers the two objections that I've just heard, but I think it covers it.
Can you be more explicit?
Well, it says, the chief goal of the police department is to reduce the threat and fear of crime, okay? And to accomplish this by proactively deploying officers and contacting and investigating suspicious persons. So, in other words, the first paragraph says what the expectation is for the officers to go out and do, and the second thing is to say, we're going to do this fairly and without bias. So, I think it's essentially, again, redundant to have to the people we contact in that second section, but that's, I think in other words, I think what you're saying is covered in the first paragraph.
Okay, James, you had your hand up, and myself and then Tam.
Well, as I read this sentence, the department will provide equal protection under the law to the people we contact and provide it fairly and without discrimination towards the individual group. It refers to the department. I think we had a little conversation about the policy applying to all of EPD versus the actual officer that's out there. So this could, in fact, apply to all of EPD. I think that we may have been trying to move, for officers that we contact. So it kind of, to me, it would just say that, okay, this part here is just for the sworn officers, but not towards everyone. If we leave it in there, then it means it applies to everyone. It could be a little bit redundant, but it takes ownership.
Back in the queue, got myself and then Tamara and then Joe again. And I'm gonna weigh in because I think I tend to agree with what Mike's saying. I don't want us to engage in that, what I've heard, wordsmithing thing, where you end up trying to fine-tune things to the point where they, seem a little bit better, but yet something happens and you lose the essence of it. And so the contact part is important. That is what we're talking about here. So I think it should remain in. I won't expand any more than that, but Tamara, go ahead.
Well, the way I read this is that the first paragraph under 402.2 says what we're doing, and the second paragraph says how we're doing it. So taking all this language out of the second part doesn't give enough direction about how we're doing it, I feel. I don't see any reason to take those words out. They're not material to the message here, I don't think.
Okay, Joe, you have the last word.
Okay.
And then we'll close it up.
Specifically, The phrase "to the people we contact" means those cases where the police contact someone. Now, what about those other cases where someone contacts the police asking for assistance? Okay, so in other words, we have removed an entire class by leaving the phrase in, we remove an entire class of contacts with the police, differentiating between police-initiated contacts and citizen-initiated contacts. And I think that that's a confusion that we would be better off removing from that sentence.
Okay, I'm going to ask for a vote, but I would remind us that when we speak of contact, we talk about the legal term here, not just an interaction between people. This is the legal term for contact, which is, as was defined in our first meeting here when we amended our policy. So everybody keep that in mind. So without any further debate, I'll call for the question. All those in favor of the motion that Joe, as Joe stated it, please say aye.
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 I need hands.
Hands up, okay. All those opposed, this like sign? Aye. Okay. You got that? You had one more, Joe. You still have the floor.
Yes. Okay, and the third change is in the last sentence of this. There's been a whole bunch of stuff struck out due to the motion that occurred at the last meeting.
When you say the last section?
It is the...
Paragraph 3 or...
It's paragraph 2, and it is the last sentence in paragraph 2.
Okay.
And the sentence now reads, "Protected class status shall not be used as the basis for detention of a person nor for providing differing levels of law enforcement services or the enforcement of the law." What I'm going to propose is that the phrase "protected class status" be replaced by the phrase "none of the causes listed in the definitions," and then continuing on with the sentence, "shall," remove the word "not," "be used as the basis for detention of a person," remove the "n" from "nor," so it says "or," "for providing differing levels of law enforcement service or the enforcement of the law." So I'll just read the amended sentence as amended. "None of the causes listed in the definitions shall be used as the basis for detention of a person or for providing differing levels of law enforcement services or the enforcement of the law."
We have a motion.
Second.
By Jesse. All right, I'm going to keep going. You want to state, you want your time to state, or talk about your motion?
How come?
Let Joe say why first.
All right.
I think, what we have is a set of definitions on the previous page, but what the sentence currently says is ignore, so we've got, there it is. Okay, so we've got three definitions: racial profiling, bias-based profiling, and protected class. If what we do is we say, based on protected class, why did we even include racial profiling or bias-based profiling to start with? Because those could be eliminated and not change the policy at all. So by expanding the definition to say all of the definitions, we capture the stuff in the definition section, okay? Otherwise, if we leave it as it has been currently rewritten, we essentially throw away two paragraphs, racial profiling and bias-based profiling, and the policy doesn't do what we asked it to do.
Okay. Tamara?
I respectfully disagree because the word protected class appears under bias-based policing right in the first sentence. An appropriate reliance on protected class characteristics listed as race. Racial profiling is a term that's used in this policy in other areas. It may not be used in this particular sentence, in this particular paragraph, but what has been done with this policy in response to the motions that were made at the last meeting is protected class status is being used throughout the policy to cover both bias-based profiling, protected class characteristics, and protected class. So bias-based profiling, my understanding was bias-based profiling is capturing protected class characteristics that are protected under the Constitution, and protected class definitions capturing what's defined in the Eugene Code. So both of those need to stay in there, but we're using protected class status as the phrase to cover all of those things.
Let's see, no other hands up. Anybody else? We're ready. Go ahead.
I'd like to ask a question. Tamara, what was the first part of what you said? Where did that get covered?
Protected class status?
Yeah.
So if you
Where-
if you look on the definition under, sorry. 402.1, under bias-based profiling, it says an inappropriate reliance on protected class characteristics such as race, ethnicity, national origin, blah, blah, blah.
All right, thank you.
Any other, anyone else wish to speak? All in favor of the motion, raise your hand.
Because I don't understand that well.
Do we need any further clarification before the vote?
I think so.
No, it'll
All
help.
right. You want to state it again one more time, please, Joe?
Okay, we can do two things. One is to read the sentence as I've suggested it. The phrase that's problematic, as I see, is protected class status. Now, protected class is defined in bold letters at the beginning of the third paragraph or fourth paragraph in the definition section. So that limits the range of
I'm just going to ask you to state what the wording is, because we asked for a clarification of the wording. So if you would
was it a
just-
clarification of the
Yeah.
wording or the purpose?
No,
Restate.
we've already.
Restate the wording, okay.
Thank you.
Okay. The motion is to replace the phrase protected class status, remove the word not, and remove the N in the word nor, and replace it with the introductory phrase, and I'll read the whole sentence. None of the causes listed in the definitions shall be used as the basis for detention of a person or for providing differing levels of law enforcement service or the enforcement of the law.
Okay, are we all clear on that, the way it will end up with the motion? Okay, all in favor of the motion, raise your hand. All opposed?
Were there any abstentions? No.
Okay. All right, Joe, those were your three. Who do we have else that has amendments here, or motions tonight? Amending the policy? Cameron?
I don't have a motion, but I've heard both in our last meeting and in our public hearing and in discussion of this policy, the suggestion that the title of the policy be changed. I don't have a suggestion for the title being changed, but I would like to have a discussion about that if somebody else has a motion, because it's something that I think we should discuss. We've heard about it, and I think I'm open to looking at a different title if somebody has a suggestion.
Mike, and then James and Joe.
I like the title of it the way it is, and the reason I like the way it is because I'd like us to say our department, as a matter of policy, has high expectations and does good things. This does that for me because it says professional police contacts. In other words, it's not a list of saying, this is the stuff we never want police to do, so much as it's saying, this is how we expect our officers to act in a professional manner. So it says, this is what professional police contacts look like. They are free of these things, and they're done in this way. So I like the way it's titled.
Okay, I have James, and then Joe and Marcos.
Yeah, there's some talk about the language and stuff, being strong, saying, hey, let's just, label it racial profiling. But I'm still of a mindset, we did some work at the state level to try to get some work done, and we had it labeled as racial profiling, and it didn't fly. It died in the Senate that year. But we resent it again, and we changed the words around for the title, and then it passed. So the most important thing is that the context and the substance of the policy, what really mattered. And in here, on the definition, it says racial profiling. And so I'm okay with, as long as, I don't care if we called it an Oregon duck, as long as the content of it captured what we want it to read and stuff, you know. So I don't have any idea to, you know, to change. I mean, if we want to call it professional police conduct or contact and stuff, maybe that's something that the officers and stuff. Here's another thing that we haven't taken very much consideration is that how does the officer feel about this? Because this is something that's going to be going down on them. And if their acceptance of this, say, professional police contact, someone may say racial profiling. I don't do that, you know, and I feel offended. They are people too. So we're looking at it from one side of the glass and stuff when it's a larger picture. We need to start expanding how we look at these things and stuff, you know. And perhaps this is the image that we would like for the officers to take, said, okay, professionalism. Okay, I am a professional. Okay, as a professional, these are some of the things that I am sworn not to do, and I can accept that. So I'm okay with it as it is. The main thing is that the substance and the context is what is important. It captures everything that I think should be in there, and probably some things are left out and could be even better. But right now, I think it's a pretty good working document.
Thank you. And Joe?
Okay. Two things. Suggest for the title, eliminating bias-based contacts as opposed to professional police contacts. And the second thing is, as I see this last vote, we have now removed ethnicity, religion, cultural group, disability, or affiliation with any other similar identifiable group as being part of a protected class. So we could sort of take the first two of the paragraphs of section 402.1.1 out, and because we've just created language that does that. But again, to answer Tamara's question, eliminating bias-based contacts would be my suggestion.
Juan Carlos?
I have taken the liberty of providing a couple of copies in the packet of different policies. One is from the Sinton, Texas Police Department, which clearly titles a racial profiling policy. I also have taken the liberty of providing a copy of the Stephenville, Texas, which also titles a racial profiling. A couple of commissioners completely hesitated to be put in any language in which, in fact, describes what the accountability will be for officers if, in fact, one is found to be doing some racial profiling. What will happen and what the repercussions, most of you, or at least all of you, I think, decided that you didn't want to do that. If you look at these policies, in fact, one of them does state there what happens when an officer, in fact, is found. So what I'd like to propose, this policy has to be titled appropriately. And the title that can be worked in, and I would like to recommend that this be titled Policy Prohibiting Racial Profiling and Bias. I'm making a motion, so Mr. Chair. So I move to retitle the policy to read Policy Prohibiting Racial Profiling and Bias.
A second.
Okay. I had a queue going outside of this, so we'll start a new queue for discussion on this motion. Motion made, properly second, changing the title, Prohibiting Racial Profiling and Bias, correct? Okay. Cameron, you first.
And thanks for your making a motion, Juan Carlos. This has been something that had been talked about. I'm torn about this because on the one hand, I hear the desire to have this this policy with a positive title saying, here's what we'll do in a way that is not a negative title. On the other hand, you know, as we listen to the Judge Leonard talk about the stops data, I realize that race is not the only thing that they're looking at when you're talking about bias-based policing or bias-based profiling. But one of the major components in the stops data is about race and ethnicity. So that's why I'm kind of torn about this. I appreciate the desire to have a positive title, but at the same time, what are we really talking about here? I mean, even though it's the first pass on the stops data, even though it's just about traffic stops at this point in time, we're assuming that that'll be carried out in the future. When you look at the list of stops data, I mean, one of the main things that we're really trying to get at is racial profiling. So isn't this policy, even though they're two separate things, isn't this policy being put in place for the interim pilot project in order to, you know, these are being done at the same time because this policy wants to be in place as the interim policy for that project, was my understanding. I could be wrong about that. So I'm struggling with, does the title matter? Should it be one way? Should it be another way? Is it really just about, I mean, is the majority of it about racial and ethnic bias and profiling along those lines? Thanks.
Thank you. I have Claire and then myself. Oh, I'm sorry, that was the other cue.
Yeah, I'm still pondering.
I've lost my track here, so Joe, you're next in this queue. Okay.
Okay. I guess in listening to the suggestion that Juan Carlos made, it struck me that we could simply call this the contacts policy. Just say contacts and remove professional police. But again, you know, we've talked about racial profiling. Right now, as it is currently worded, it is okay to profile people based on religion. It is okay to profile people on economic status, on cultural group, on disability, okay, or on similar identifiable group factors. So.
All right, now, I have Jesse and then Claire.
I think we should change it because right now the police operations manual is available online. There's a website for it. I share it with people who ask me a question about what the policy is on something. And if I had a case or if someone was looking up, I want to see what their policy is on racial profiling, professional police contacts. You're scrolling down a giant list of policies. That takes you right to what you're looking for. This doesn't necessarily.
Okay, so I have Claire.
So I just respectfully need to contradict you, Joe. The protected class status includes religion, color, sex, national origin, marital status, familial status, age, sexual orientation, source of income, or disability are all defined as protected classes under Eugene Code. So they have not been removed by us not agreeing to support your other motion. And you've said it twice now, so that's why I'm bringing this up.
Okay.
It doesn't apply to a cultural group, but I'm not even sure how you would define that. So I'm torn on the question of changing the title because of the inclusion of sexual orientation, source of income, marital status, disability. And if we focus it solely on racial profiling, we are forgetting that there are other categories of people who can suffer discrimination. So I might be more inclined to support something that made that clear, and Juan Carlos's motion starts to get at that with the racial profiling bias piece, but I'm still not certain if I'm going to support it.
Okay, so when I was in the original queue, I was going to talk about the topic, so I'm going to move myself into the queue here, and then Mike, and then James, and then Jim after me. So what I was struck by in Joe's comments were eliminating bias-based contacts, and again, in doing that, it presumes that, of course, we do have bias-based contacts because we're going to try to eliminate them now. I'm not calling the Orkin guy if I don't have roaches in my house. You know, I'm going to eliminate the roaches from the house if they're in there. And if the same thing applies with the police department, it kind of paints a wide brush of the police officers that we have this rampant, bias-based department, and we're trying to eliminate that bias from the department. But I think it works a lot better, in my opinion, if you send affirmative messages out and project what you expect from people. I expect professionalism from a police officer I come in contact with. I expect courtesy, and I expect respect. So if I'm getting those three things from you, you're doing your job. That's the way I look at it. I want them to understand that up front. I don't want them to go in thinking that they're going to be accused of being biased immediately, and I've got to prove that I'm not. I don't want them on the defensive. I certainly don't want the public to think that we have a huge problem on the department that we can't, that we need to get rid of and eliminate. So I think the second title, I really don't have any problem with it, addressing it more specifically, the one that Juan Carlos is, speaking more to the motion now. I would like to see the compromise of adding professionalism back into that title, though, because I think it's important to project that to the public. We're not just saying prohibiting racial profiling, we're saying act professional when you do make your stops. So I'm looking for a compromise in getting professional police contact back into the policy of prohibiting racial profiling. Perhaps we could merge the two and make that the second part, prohibiting racial profiling and bias and professional police professional police contact. So that we're specifically talking about what it is we're looking at, and also at the same time talking about how we want to get to that, because Jesse had a good point that we want people to be able to identify what it is that they're looking for, what the policy is on racial profiling. So maybe we could do the both. I don't know, but that's just my feeling. Right. And Mike, you were...
Thank you very much. I think that I understand entirely what Juan Carlos's point, and I agree with it too, that let's call something what it is. Let's try to deal with it appropriately so everybody can see it and figure it out and understand what it is we're talking about. And Jesse's point, similarly, let's name something so we can understand it. And I still, though, want something to have a positive sort of, and I'm a word guy, that's what I do for a living, so I thought of this, and maybe this is a potential compromise that Juan Carlos and Jesse might be willing to consider. Bias-free police contacts. So I would move to, what's the word, begins with an S, I can't think of it.
A friendly amendment?
Yeah, well, no, I would move to.
Substitute.
Thank you very much. I would move to substitute the wording bias-free police contacts as the policy name. If I get a second.
Second.
I'll say,
Okay, we have a substitute motion and a second. So it's getting confusing, but I probably need to start another queue. But I'm going to go ahead and go with James, Jim, and Juan Carlos on this one. So we'll just transfer you over to this substitute motion. James?
Point of order. So
State your
would
point.
the new proposed language be removing the original motion?
It is substituting it, yes, for this language. So that is a substitute motion, yes. Made and seconded. So James, you're next in the queue.
I'll just pass.
All right, then we got Jim.
Well, that wasn't the topic I was going to comment on, but I do like his language
Okay.
better than, so I would support his. But I would like back in the, well, we'll see how it goes.
All right, Juan Carlos.
So I am actually quite disappointed that my two elected officials at this table are not willing to talk about racial profiling. This is something that a community has had and dealt with for years. I'm sorry, but I have the privilege of also being appointed by you, I guess. But although I understand...
I'm going to have
that
to step in and ask the commissioners not personalize
I'm not.
discussion.
I'm not. I'm presenting my
Discussion
opinion on the motion, sir.
Let's, excuse me, but let us hold our discussion to the merits of the motion and not personalize what a person says, what their motivation is. Let's talk about what the motion, the substance of the motion is about. So when we talk about it, we can talk about why it should be this or that.
I think it was.
Thank you.
So I will not be voting for the motion, and I'm very disappointed that that will not even be taking place, and that would be a mistake.
Have any other, Jim?
I guess I'll go ahead and make my comments. I guess kind of leads into this. the two examples that were provided to us by Juan Carlos for the policies, the one policy strictly and only, as far as I can tell, the very first one, I think that's the one from Sinton, only deals with race, it deals with nothing else. So by that policy, if you only looked at that, everything else you can discriminate against. So that only deals with just race, whereas the policy we're looking at deals with everything. So those are not apples to apples comparisons, those are apples to oranges. And the other policy actually, even though it says racial-based profiling, their definition of race includes all of those other things. Even though it says, oh, their policy only says racial, their definition includes sexual orientation, gender, everything else too. So that's not a true apples to apples comparison either, because their definitions are different than ours. So I still support Mike's motion.
I have James and then Mike.
Yeah, Jim, I think that you said it perfectly. I can see both parts of it. We're going to do a policy on racial profiling. Perhaps all these other elements in here should not be here, because then we were talking about race, and these other socioeconomic status and stuff should not be included because they don't deal with race. Race would be dealing with race. Here we're talking about socioeconomic status, where we're talking about a whole lot of sexual orientation, things like that. That's not racial. So I agree, if we're going to have a policy that's race, then we need to make sure that we do a policy that says racial profiling and make the language and stuff very abruptly to that. That would make sense. On the other side, and I agree with Jim, this is more expanded, and it encapsulates a lot more because you're talking about religion and everything else. So this takes it out of the context of race and expands it to a wide spectrum. So bias would seem pretty much applicable for this, because bias can come in any form: socioeconomic status, disabilities, and all these other things. So if you look at it like that, and I agree, if we're going to have a racial profiling policy, then let's create a racial profiling policy and call it that and be specific with that. But this is just a little bit more expanded than just a racial thing, because it has more. It's wider. So, but I do agree with Juan Carlos. We're going to have one. Let's create a racial profiling, which will be separate and it will be specific to that.
Okay, Mike?
Thank you. James said a great deal of what I was going to say. I was going to respond to my friend Juan Carlos by saying I'm firmly of the opinion that with the contents and the mechanics of this policy, we've addressed the idea of making sure that we're addressing racial profiling as we should and as we've wanted to for quite some time. And I think we can proudly stand up and say we've done exactly that. But I think we can also say we've gone farther. We've gone farther than just that, to say that we're now dealing with what our expectations are, and they're high expectations, for police dealing with people with bias in any way, for any reason, and protecting a great many more people than just people who would have issues around race. And we're providing a great many more people the protection of bias-free policing. So I would say we've done that, and it's a good thing, and we certainly should. But now we can say we've gone one step better.
Okay, we are going to go ahead and close the debate and vote on this. We're voting on the substitute motion, which is to retitle the policy Bias-Free Policing Contact, Bias-Free Police Contacts. That's the substitute motion. If the motion fails, then we'll vote on the original motion. All those in favor of the substitute motion to change the title to Bias-Free Police Contacts, raise your hand. All opposed? Okay. The first motion is moved. The second motion passes. And then now is the motion. The substitute motion, rather, is the main motion, so we voted on that, and that passes. Way to go, Mike. All right, we're moving on in this policy, but I have to tell you we're into the time that we should be working on our bias-based policing debrief, and the committee, what's the pleasure of the commission? Do we want to continue with the policy, or is there any motion to accept it now, or we want to carry this over to next? Tamara first, and then Claire first, and then Tamara.
Well, I just had one question that might have been addressed, and I guess I'm asking to work on the policy for another moment while I ask this question. On 402.2, the second sentence of that first paragraph, the department will accomplish this by proactively deploying officers to areas of high crime. In the police commission public forum, we heard some concern about that as a standalone sentence, and I think some of us who were there and responded to public comment suggested, I think Ed might have suggested this from the podium, that perhaps modifying that to say areas of high crime as determined by data or data-led policing practices would frame it up in a more precise way that might give some reassurance to some of the concerns we heard at the...
I second that motion.
So I make that motion, thank you.
I was waiting for those words. Thank you. And a second. All right, we have a motion before us. Any discussion on the motion?
Can you restate it?
So the second sentence of the first paragraph of 402.2 would read, the department will only accomplish this by proactively deploying officers to areas of high crime as determined by data-led policing practices by contacting and investigating. The rest of the sentence would remain the same.
That takes out the subjectiveness. Any further discussion on this? Because I have a sense that the commission is. Okay, then all those in favor of that amendment, say, raise your hand. Keep to that group. All opposed? Unanimous, thank you. Tamara, you were in the queue.
Oh, I just had one, I'm not going to make a motion, but I just had a suggestion. I looked at a couple of their policies from a couple of their states and jurisdictions, and one thing that they had included in their policy that's not in ours was a complaint section. If there's a complaint about this, how to make complaints. We all know that there's a complaint process in the city of Eugene, that we have the police auditor's office that intakes complaints, but we haven't routinely mentioned that in other policies, but this policy in particular, because it is a hot topic in our community, because it's an area where there's a lot of focus and there should be, I wonder if we wouldn't include a complaint section in this, telling people, telling the officers and the public, if there's a complaint in this area, how it will be handled or where they should be directed. They should be directed to the police auditor's office. So I'm not going to make a motion. It's just a suggestion for, is it captain? I'm not captain. What's your title, Matt? I couldn't remember.
I'm a sergeant.
Sergeant.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I
was a
screwed that up
captain in
with
the Army
everyone, not
once,
just
so-
you. I know. I didn't know Dave Nats either, so.
It's
sorry
all
about
right.
that.
Matt is just
Yeah,
fine.
okay.
There's a captain position open.
I'm not reasonable.
Just reading the future.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. So it's just a suggestion for your consideration, of the captain's consideration, the chief's consideration.
You guys.
Yeah,
Okay.
the department's
You people.
consideration, but it's something I really think you should consider including a complaint in section in this policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Tamara. We're not ready to, I guess, to move this forward, so it will be carried over till the next agenda without objection.
I didn't understand, I apologize for clarification, why we're not voting to accept this right now?
I'm sensing that other commissioners have issues here with this policy. Am I wrong? Is anybody that's ready to? We want to make a motion to?
I moved to put it forward.
Okay.
I second.
But I'm open to those who don't. I'd
We have a
vote
motion.
against
We
it
have
if there's a reason not to.
second to send the policy as amended tonight, approved to the chief. Will we have any further discussion on the motion? And then Jesse.
I don't really have anything against the policy. There's just some verbiage that was kind of confusing to me. It's in 402.5. It says, if the supervisor determines it necessary, he or she will complete a blue team entry before they secure which details the circumstances of the contact. I'm not sure what, it's kind of a messy line, I'm not sure what it's saying. I was thinking maybe if before they secure should be dropped off.
Well, we probably threw in some vernacular. What it means is, if you're asking what.
Well, no, I'm not saying what it means, but
Okay.
it doesn't read right to me.
Okay.
It sounds more like,
It sounds like there's something in there that's not supposed to be that.
Before they
Give me a
secure.
second to read it. I
Okay.
probably made sense to my pea brain and no others, but.
You can make it clearer.
Watch that, Captain.
Oh, I see.
Maybe, Matt is suggesting maybe put prior to the end of their shift or something like that. That's, they're trying to say, so he doesn't go back home, he or she doesn't go back home and then do it tomorrow. They want it done prior to the end of the shift.
So instead of before they secure, like, put prior to the end of the shift?
Securing to us means I'm going home for the night, thanks.
Okay, okay.
I've used
Okay,
some
I'm sorry.
vernacular that.
Then that's where
makes sense
I
to
wasn't,
police,
making
not-
sense to me.
before they call it a night.
Yeah, okay, if that makes sense to you, but I kind of like.
It could be more clear to somebody, I mean, people who are not police officers who don't call going home from work securing,
Yeah.
read these also, so.
Yeah, okay.
Can I have Jesse?
Okay, sure. I have a suggestion.
Oh, you just looking, Juan Carlos has got several suggestions, so not my place, but.
Yeah, that's okay.
If you, I want to vote against it if this is not finished to somebody's.
I had a sense that it wasn't, but I wanted to defer to the commission.
I just didn't know.
Whatever the majority wants, that's what's important, so. Claire, do you want to speak to that or something else?
I just in terms of that piece that Joe said, I think just two commas.
Yes.
Because it's the separation between they will complete an entry which details the circumstances, or moving before they secure to the end of the sentence
You're
would get it.
absolutely
If you want to reword that
Yeah.
to best, because it sounds like we may be carrying this over.
That
so.
doesn't need that further. James?
Yeah, I think that we probably want to carry this over because there are some other things that
Yeah,
are starting to appear and stuff in the language and stuff. So I don't think that it's quite ready.
You're going to withdraw your motion?
Yeah, I'll withdraw my
We
motion.
won't have to vote. Okay, thank you. Motion withdrawn. This will carry over to the May agenda, and you can take it up again. So now we're into the commission's debrief of the committee's work. Once again, I know I've said this a lot, and I'm just amazed at the great participation that this committee has had. It's amazing how quickly they met, how often they met, and how together they were. When I heard earlier comments about the advisory committee to the chief, not everybody was there all the time, but this committee has pretty much, everybody has met every single time, just about, and put this together. Excellent work as a team. So I want to again commend Juan Carlos and the rest of the committee. And Bill Whalen, who I heard from earlier by email, could not be here tonight. I'm sorry, it was Ed Gehring who could not be here tonight. His doctor is asking to rest, so I assume he's not feeling well. So I wanted to pass that on to you. But he and the rest of the committee have done a fabulous job and brought this to the public attention in the best possible way with a panel and then a public hearing. So I think we've done a good job. George?
I'd like to make one comment to that. It was great work. The only thing that bothered me was we have other minorities in this, and there was no blacks or no Asians included in on it, so it kind of, it wasn't fair and equitable to all concerned citizens in the Eugene area for that reason. I think it was great work, incredible committee, but I would have felt more comfortable if we would have had, according to the 2010 census, we have 4% Asians in here and 4.8 Latinos and 1.4 Afro-Americans or blacks. Anyway, it would have been good to have it a little more diverse.
Okay, thank you.
Great job, though.
Thank you. And Tamara?
I wanted to also thank the committee for their work. They worked hard and fast, and I thought the panel was well-balanced and did a great job. And I appreciated the word getting out about the public hearing. We saw some folks there that we, don't normally see that took the time to come and speak at that. So I really want to commend the committee for their work.
Thank you. Well, Carlos, you're being the chair, would love to hear your report and debrief of committee's work.
So you have some notes from the public forum. I think it was pretty well attended. 9 of you decided that it was important to come out, and you were also gracious enough to let me put you on the spot and responded. And you responded very well. Your participation is very important. I want to specifically thank you, Councilwoman Cyril, for being there. I think your constituency will greatly benefit by your participation, and I encourage you to continue to do this. I think it's going to be important for you and you moving on. The comments that were made in terms of the composition, they're points well taken. I encourage all the commissioners to go back and read the notes so that you will discover how the process ended up being in terms of the people that were presented as a list to choose from, and you will see the vast diversity in the people that we asked. Some of them did not want to participate, and some were chosen by the community. You will also see my voting in terms of where I went. Secondly, when we presented the options for the panel, all of you had an opportunity to comment and really notice the composition, and perhaps you maybe chose not to. So although the point is well taken, the body can definitely reassign another panel to be more inclusive of what we're choosing. That's something you can do if you want to. But specifically on the work of the committee itself, I am very proud of how we went about doing our business. There's a lot of flexibility, there was a lot of help. People were just willing to jump in and take a portion of it. And that's how it really should work. It really, not because it was small, it was self-selected, by the way. I also appreciate some of the comments back that we had from the community in terms of even the composition of the committee itself. So I will just name Joe as one of the people that would help put teams together. Of course, Edward and Bill was incredibly, putting the word out on behalf of the commission. I think the commission as a whole looked very, very well in the community to let them know what we're doing. But the message that was coming back is, in fact, are we finally addressing racial profiling? This is why I wanted to focus on that, and I added bias on the time. But overall, thank you. This is not just because I was appointed to be the chair, but it's the work of everyone, and Corey's support on all of this. So, if you have any questions, please ask me now.
James.
Yeah, I don't have a question or anything, but I would like to say, Juan Carlos, the committee and stuff did a superb job. I was really proud of the manner in which the committee handled that affair, especially that one at Harris Hall, and it was very kind and gracious of you to invite the rest of the commission to come and sit up there. But this was not the full body doing. This was the committee that you chaired, and I think that we all recognize that and gave you the respect and stuff that you do for the work you, Joe, Edward, and Bill have done. So I really do appreciate it. The feedback that we got, I thought, was very well received. I thought the participation from the community was a blended, and there was a lot of diverse perspectives out there and stuff. One gentleman even asked, why do we even need a policy on racial profiling and stuff? And I thought that, okay, well, all of the community has different views and stuff. So what you did was excellent. And we'll continue to work on it. It's one of these things that we just have to keep working on it, and we'll chip away bit by bit, and then we'll get there. But we also have to keep in mind that there's a bigger picture. If we don't bring those the officers out on the street into the conversation or find out what's going through their heads, we're just kind of doing a top-down, hey, we're going to give you this and you eat it type deal. So we need to make sure that we're sensitive to their needs and what's going on with them too. We've had from our previous survey that we did, some of the feedback we got is that they didn't understand who the police commission was and what the police commission was doing, and then some probably was thinking that who are these people telling us how to do our jobs? So there's an opportunity for us to connect more with the street guys and girls that are out there on the road as well. So I would ask that the chief and would provide some other opportunities, and we talked about this before. You know, the ride-alongs are great, but then what are the chances that we can get together as members of the police commission and actually go and attend maybe a briefing or something so that we can talk to the officers and stuff, and maybe we can say hey, here's some of the feedback that we got, some of the things that people may not have told you, being very respectful but being honest at the same time. So there are some things that we can do, but we need probably a little bit more access, and they probably want to find out a little bit more about what we're doing too, because if we're talking about policies and they got to work with these policies, are we really doing them a great service?
Thank you. Good points. Good points. Thank you. So this is a three-part problem that we're dealing with in this item on the agenda. The second part is figuring out how we're going to deal with this. So with Carter's able-bodied assistance, I prepared a possible commission work plan and some thoughts on responding to public comment was one of the issues. We changed that a little bit tonight by people speak. We addressed it as commissioners so that we can get some feedback to them. So now, what is the commission's pleasure? The document is in your packet. This is a draft for us to consider. That's all it is. It can be amended, changed, or accepted, however you want to do it. The time frame on the possible work plan is set so that we don't forget about checking up. There's no way we can know what kind of job we're doing or anybody else is doing for that matter unless there is a follow-up schedule of how to evaluate how we've done. So this is to provide you a plan so that by February 2017, we're not twiddling our thumbs and wondering whatever happened to that police stop policy that we did. You know, we're going to be following through with it and continuing to see what the results of this are through the next couple of years. So you might want to consider that as a possibility. And certainly I'm open to comments from the members on how they want to answer. We'll take the first part first, and that's responding to public comments. What's the pleasure? Jesse?
Oh, we're on the timeline that you came up with, right?
Exactly, but the first part of it, which is, right now, I think we should at least get that out of the way. How do we want to respond to comments? Does the commission want a system of response? How do you want to do it? Do you want to do it collectively each time when you get a comment? Do you want to have a commissioner appointed or committee to, I don't know. What do you think?
I think that's one thing that, I mean, it's good to respond to public comments, but we want to be very careful that we don't engage in a dialogue back and forth with the person that actually does the comment, because they can take us to a whole different level. So we want to be very aware. I mean, it's okay to address the comments and stuff, but we want to be very careful that we don't actually get engaged in a conversation, and before you know it, then we're really off track with, as far as the agenda is. Just my thoughts.
Thank you, Jesse. I might cut you off.
No, I didn't have anything about that section.
Tamara, you're next.
I really appreciate the agenda item being added, commissioner response. That used to be commissioner comments. I did feel like we were missing something at the beginning of our meeting, particularly after public comment, but also the opportunity to comment back about feedback received either in that context or in our hearing or public panel forum. So I like that, and I feel like people have really listened to the comments that I've heard around the table. I feel like people are really listening to the feedback we've received from the public. People are commenting on it and including it in their considerations when they're talking about the policy. So I really like having that there. We may or may not comment or on all of the feedback that we get, but I think it's a good opportunity for folks as part of our meeting agenda to do it in that format.
Okay, Juan Carlos, and then Claire.
Yeah, in my addendum to the packet, I'm also introducing the awareness of not just limiting to returning to the commissioner's response or comments. I think that's great, but I think it may be only limited to people that come and talk to us. But I think what we need to be aware of is when entities or groups are in fact taking the time to provide feedback, specifically on policy. In the past, we have received formally feedback from the ACLU, even from the police auditor, recently from from LULAC. So that we need to make sure that we have a system in which we have even a respond, if anybody chooses to respond. Because again, the message we were putting out there with this process that we just went through in terms of bringing the panel and the community forum was we want your feedback. And that now we have to respond, or do we choose to respond specifically to entities that in fact are recognized, established, and respected. So again, not just limited to what we heard tonight, but also specifically either verbal or written feedback. So I hope you guys have some insight on that too.
Okay, Claire, next.
So I guess I lean more towards Tamara's perspective. I think it's really challenging to feel like you have to respond in kind or in full to every written comment or every spoken comment that is received. And I think, having worked with that chapter of the ACLU of Oregon, they're not expecting a letter back from the police commission. They are expecting us to read, consider, maybe even discuss their input, and hopefully, if their input makes sense in context, incorporate their feedback into the work. So for me, that's responding to the public comment in those contexts. I do appreciate, we do this at council meetings, and it seems like a practice we're starting here, though I always miss those parts of these meetings. So that if we have public comment, we give time for, in this case, commissioners to reflect upon or respond to the actual comment that's been given at the meeting. And I appreciated what Commissioner Juan Carlos did at the public forum, where you listened to everybody's comments and then you gave everyone a chance to kind of respond to in terms of how might we incorporate these pieces into the work that we're doing. So I think if there seemed to be a compelling need to respond to input, like a specific question was posed, or there was a great deal of confusion about what the purpose of a policy was, that as a commission, we might want to draft a response to that. But I think in general, listening, reading, considering, and working to incorporate pieces into the work is, in my mind, the appropriate response.
Any thoughts on that part? Okay. We don't have any formal motions on that, so I'll move to the next part of the agenda, which is to talk about a timeline. And I think that's where Jesse, you had some.
Yeah, it seems like at some point we need to talk about what we want in the report, and rather than just receive a 6-month report that doesn't have maybe what we wanted to find out about.
Well, that's what we hope to do by getting the report, is question it. So my thought is that by presenting it in a timeline fashion, we would then be able to say, well, wait a minute, what about this data? What does this mean? What happened here? Why do we have this little bump and anomaly? So that will be on the agenda when we do take up these different points along the roadway to see what it is we're questioning.
Do you envision us getting all of the raw data in addition to a report about how it's working or what the department's doing with it?
I don't know. Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. So maybe you can mention that. We'll visit with the chief on that, Captain, and see if in fact he intends to provide us raw data or just what the data reveals. I mean, because there is a difference, possibly. Pamela?
In our January Police Commission meeting, when the charge of the commission went to the committee, there were 3 things on the list. They were hold a public hearing related to bias-based policing, hold a community panel, and review the professional police stops policy in 1 year. I don't see that on this timeline, the review the professional police stops policy. If I missed it, I apologize, but perhaps that should be included in this timeline since that's what we said we were doing.
Okay.
The intent was that it is included in your
Okay.
6-month reviews of the
Okay.
pilot program, 12-month review of the pilot program, and the 12-month
Okay.
after the program. But we can be clear about
should
adding
probably
the
add that
language.
language.
about
Thanks, I
policy.
just wanted to make sure we didn't lose that piece. Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else? Not all, nobody has any heartburn with this. I'll move that we accept this timeline as our future timeline for follow-up. Any second to that?
Second.
Second by Tamara. Discussion on the motion, other than the addition that was mentioned, which is adding in police policy review at those junctures as well, as those waypoints. Anything else that somebody, yes?
I just wanted to make sure that even though, as leadership of the commission, that we're not completely, that there is still some variance in here, because it's possible that the data collecting, they're not going to be able to produce anything at that time. So I just want to make sure that we're not tying our hands by saying, this is what we're going to do, that this is more of a recommended timeline, not a strict timeline.
I accept that, yes.
Or deadline, yeah, because I would hate, I certainly don't want to get data that's not ready for us to look at, and
Yeah, thank you for adding context. I think we understand that, but thank you. George? you
Oh, I
ready?
was just waiting for my Leah.
Anybody else have any comments on this? If not, I'll ask the question. All those in favor of adopting this timeline, signify by holding up your hand. All opposed? Timeline's adopted. Now moving to commissioner comments, which we are at the end of the agenda meeting, but we normally go to 8:30, so if commissioners have comments, we'll go around the table. Anybody have anything they'd like to add to tonight's discussion? Larry?
Well, I'll just share, we had a meeting organized by a neighborhood watch group in Whitaker, which is both in my ward and my neighborhood. Some neighbors were having some real problems with a particular house and had been trying for a number of months to try to, and this was kind of low-level drug dealing, alleged prostitution, harassment of neighbors. And it took some time, but the block watch got formed and they connected with Lieutenant Fellman and code enforcement from the city of Eugene, and we had a very productive meeting with the neighbors who've done a lot of proactive things on their own, including putting up some pretty effective security cameras on their own property and sharing that amongst themselves. And so I just wanted to compliment the department on the response and also the willingness to think about how we can work more effectively sooner on these types of situations. And there are a number of houses throughout the city where these types of things are going on. It's not just limited to one part of town. But it was very impressive to hear from Lieutenant Feldman kind of how officers share both formally and informally information about known suspects and how they work that into their daily work to help mitigate some of these problems. But at the same time, because right now it seems to be mostly low-level drug dealing, it's the kind of charges that aren't being prosecuted by the DA, so we're not able to really intersect in some of the, continuous kind of quality of life issues that this impacts on people living right next door and trying to just carry on their day-to-day business with alleged criminals basically threatening and harassing them as they come and go from their own homes. So it was both a positive meeting and then also a discouraging meeting because of the realities that we're facing right now in terms of Lane County's situation. But I did want to compliment the department on the proactive work.
Thank you. And George?
I just want to give a little report about the Citizens Review Board. We had a situation where a DUI suspect got a little unruly at the jail, and use of force came in effect, and it was all justified, but in comments that the officer in question could have used a little more de-escalation other than escalation in it. It was a very productive meeting, I think, and I think that got back. We have a very good connection with the police department, so it was a very productive meeting. and we got to meet the police canine, who I'll tell you what, those things, you don't even want to pet them, they're stinky.
Stinky. Okay, go ahead. Anybody else? Jim?
I didn't comment before because I know we were running out of time, but I did want to definitely thank the committee that put all the work into the meetings. I was amazed. It seemed like almost every day I was getting another message that they were having another meeting. I was going, I have no idea how they found the time to meet as often as they did and to go through all the work that they did. The original list of the potential people for the panel discussion was huge. I don't know how many of those people were called and contacted, but it was. I can't even hardly. I'm running out of words or good words to say that the work that was done was just absolutely amazing. So I want to make sure that I got on record saying that because I was very, very, very impressed. Thank you, Juan Carlos and team.
Yes.
We had in our neighborhood a situation similar to what Claire is talking about. 2 houses from me is a huge problem house. We're getting it better. What we found though is when we call police non-emergency, all the neighbors around this place are all working together on it, and you got to re-explain the situation every time. Though we've got some phone numbers for a few of the regular officers that we can call during the day, at 10 o'clock at night we don't have phone numbers for somebody who knows this address. Come out here. We finally got to the point where we knew, worked with the owner, anybody who was there was criminal trespassing and police could come. It'd be nice to have some way to get that, this address triggers, oh yeah, them, get out there. Or get out there if you can.
That was a theme at this meeting too.
Ongoing complaint type
Or just
situation.
having to repeat the story over and over again.
Right.
Yeah.
Juan Carlos?
Since Bill and Edward not here, a lot of the credit goes to them too, because it really takes a lot of work and people were willing to divide the work. I believe that because so much was going out to the community and the work that we do, I think the police commission reestablished, at least to some extent, that we work on policies and the visibility for the commission itself increased, I think, my perspective, based on the media coverage. And I think we're going in the right direction. We'll see where we go in the future.
Okay, thank you. Mike?
Well, I'll just say, in Ward 5, one of the issues, it's interesting, you guys were all talking about this. I was just asking these fellows back here earlier. Ours is a park, a neighborhood park, where the same sort of, there's kids playing stereos and doing drug deals till 2 in the morning, really loud across the street from, the kids that are sleeping in the, in the upstairs, and, people throwing beer bottles out on the street and that sort of thing. And there's really no response. And the advice I got this evening in talking with the gentleman back here was environmental controls of light and places where people can see and where they can't, and make a difference in that. So I'd love to know anything more you learn when it comes
Cameras.
to what that do.
You have something to do with that?
Yeah, just to let everybody aware, like with Lieutenant Feldman came to your meeting, the one thing you're seeing is that we started back up is getting the lieutenants and watch commanders out to the community meetings, your situation. Because a lot of times the officers handle calls, but they don't see the bigger picture. So what we're doing is we're getting, and again, we can look at data as you saw out there, but it doesn't always tell us the true story. So we're getting the lieutenants out in the communities, at these community group meetings, to listen, to find out and understand what the community thinks are the problems. So this way we can also incorporate this. With our next move is to incorporate that into the data-led policing. And then what we'll do is we'll give lieutenants ownership of those problems. And so it's just not that beat officer that's solving it, but it's the lieutenant and the sergeant, and they take ownership of it. They see it all the way through. And one of the excellent things, especially when we talk about lacking resources in the courts, we have other tools such as code enforcement, which is great. If you can shut that house down and close it down, they might not go to jail, but that house is going to be stopped. So that's kind of like where we're moving to next. We're not there yet. There's software out there that does exactly what you do, but it's pretty spendy. It's about $150,000. But we're looking, and we're in the infancy stages of doing those things that we were talking about, looking at how we can do it ourselves and build that information, so we're just in the foothold of that right now. So.
Anyone else have anything? Wish everybody a good night.
Thank you.
Oh, wait, 13.
I will get that information.
Oh, thank you.
That's,
I always try to
See you Saturday. Do you
Yeah.
want to make
See you
anything?
during the prime.